Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Naruto. I have set my skills to the limit. Chapter 41. The lights in the room were shining brightly. Shenyi frowned and quietly pushed open the door of the room, and tiptoed inside. There was no trace of Tsunade in the place where the light illuminated, but there was nothing unusual about it. However, Shenyi still felt that something was wrong. If Tsunade returned home early, he would never enter his room. Slowly approaching his room, Shenyi could already clearly hear someone searching for something inside. Where did that guy hide him? Could it be possible to carry it with you all the time? Maybe there will be something to gain from Namikaze Minato. No, I have been observing for a few days. After the separation at Ninja Academy, the scroll has been here at Shenyi. Shenyi rubbed his chin. It turned out that it was the three guys who surrounded him not long ago and wanted to get the forbidden scroll. It's really three stupid thieves who didn't know to leave one person standing at the door to let the wind go. The three guys, Shenyi, have almost determined who they are. They are children in the same classroom, and a simple lesson will be fine. Cough cough. Pretending to cough twice, the room suddenly heard the sound of turmoil, and the three guys hurriedly opened the window and jumped out. But because he was too anxious to land on the ground steadily, the three howls of pain stopped abruptly. Shenyi smiled helplessly. It must have been extremely painful to fall, but she didn't dare to make a sound for fear that Shenyi would find out. Pushing open the door, I found that my room was dilapidated, with clothes and quilts scattered in the corners and half-covered cabinets. No matter where it was revealed, it was looted, but Shenyi couldn't feel a trace of anger. If you stop here, you can consider letting it go. Otherwise, losing your temper is not something the three of them can bear. While tidying up the room, I set rules for myself, and I can't be provoked again and again. Suddenly, the corner of the room emitted a brief light, but it was caught by Shenyi's sight even though it was fleeting. Frowning and walking over, under the pressure of countless clothes, a scroll suddenly appeared. He picked up the scroll and flicked it back and forth in the palm of his hand a few times, but he couldn't tell what scroll it was about. He wanted to call, but with Shenyi's current ability, he still couldn't break the above seal restriction, so he had to temporarily put it in his ninja tool pocket and look for opportunities to find out in the future. The scroll that suddenly appeared in the room may have been accidentally dropped by those three guys, or it may be the three habitual offenders, and I don't know which family the little guy is from. Shenyi shook his head helplessly, and continued to tidy up the mess in the room. After a while, there was a sound of pushing the door outside the room, and Tsunade slowly walked into the room. Is there a thief in the house? It looks so messy. Sister Tsunade, this is your house. Which blind guy dares to come to your house to steal things? What do you mean, kid? Are you talking about my sister being violent? Tsunade raised his fist and shook it, the expression on his face tightened. As if the next second to welcome Shenyi would be a stormy bombardment, Shenyi swallowed his saliva and shook his head hastily. Just kidding. Even being fiddled with by Tsunade twice in the name of love is not something Shenyi can bear, not to be injured but to bear the pain. In terms of chakra control, no one in the village can compare with Tsunade, and Shenyi also did not dare to try easily. Okay, leave it to me to clean up the room, you stupid boy. Tsunade took the action from Kamiya's hand. Kamito opened his hands to hug Tsunade's neck, and kissed lightly on Tsunade's forehead. Sister Tsunade is the best for me. Is Shenyi at home? Are you there, Shenyi? Suddenly there was a hasty knock on the door outside. Shenyi frowned and quickened his pace to the door. When he opened the door, he found Luju standing outside the door. His rapid breathing showed that he came here in a hurry, and he was out of breath when he spoke. He wanted to pull Luju into the room, but was rejected by Luju's movements. 3 generations of adults sent us a temporary task, and Minato is already waiting for us at the entrance of the village. Shenyi nodded, turned around and greeted Tsunade, then followed Luju to the direction of the village entrance. The chakra perception spread out silently, and one could clearly feel that the chakra in Luju's body was very disordered, which seemed to be due to a long time on the road. As a ninja, if you're out of breath after just a short walk, you'll suffer a lot in battle. It's not because the 3rd generation's notice was too sudden, and I just practiced all the chakras at home. After a while, the 3 gathered at the entrance of the village, and Minato looked anxiously at Luju and Shenyi. However, Shenyi didn't have much yearning for this action. After all, for the third generation, everyone was just a kid who hadn't graduated yet. So I don't arrange tasks that are very difficult, just more anxious. The two of you are finally here, let's go quickly. What's the rush? Lu Ju needs to recover from his current state, otherwise he will suffer a lot in battle. But the time left for us is running out, and the adults of the third generation are very anxious. What is the mission? It's just a survey. In a desolate place not far from the village, the ninjas of Muya village discovered the appearance of some humans, and it has been confirmed that there are no ninjas there. So the third generation wanted the three of Shenye to go over and check thoroughly, and bring those people back to the village before dawn to wait for their punishment. After hearing all the content, Shenye turned around and looked at Lu Ju, but such a task does not require restoring a complete physical condition. Then this mission must be completely under my command. We don't even know if there will be any accidents. Minato and Lu Ju have no objection to this, the two of them have already regarded Shenye as the leader, and at the same time, they are also the target they want to catch up in the future. After making sufficient preparations, the three of them rushed towards their destination, jumping continuously among the trees. In order to save more time on the road, Minato did not hesitate to spend chakra to perform the Flying Thunder God art, and the three distanced themselves from the village. As everyone knows, there are still big variables waiting in that unknown place, and only in the battle can we grow better. Sensing the change of chakra in Minato's body, Shenye quickly stopped Minato from continuing to perform the Flying Thunder God art. Try to restore the chakra in the body during the next journey. Just bring those people back to the village, and leave chakra on the way. Things are far from as simple as imagined. What you two have to do now is to follow my instructions. Have you forgotten how you promised me when you left the village? The expression on Shenya's face was serious, like a majestic king at this moment, and he couldn't tolerate Minato and Lu Ju's rebuttals at all. The two of them also knew that it was for their own good, so they agreed again and again. The speed of the three of them gradually slowed down, and at the same time, Shenye unfolded the fairy mode and touched the natural force in the surrounding air, not only pouring into his body, but also accompanying the bodies of Shikajiju and Minato. After several hours of rushing, the three finally arrived at their destination. With the help of Shenye, Lu Ju and Minato also recovered most of their chakra. Even if there is a sudden turmoil, they can cope with it. In a large forest, there is only a small cabin surrounded by clusters of tree trunks. Shenye hid in the woods and observed for a while, but did not find chakra appearing between the wooden houses. Set off. With an order, Lu Ju and Minato jumped off the tree trunk and landed next to the cabin at the same time, while Shenye landed directly on top of the cabin. The three of them exchanged simple glances and moved almost at the same time. Minato pushed open the window and jumped into the room, Lu Ju pushed the door and entered, and Shenye used his strange force to break through the roof and fall into the room. There was no one in the small wooden house, only the three of Shenye looked around, looking for the presence of people. There is no one here. Looking at the dust on the table, no one came in for several years. Could it be that the news from the ninjas in the village is false? After all, the 3 generations of adults will not lie to us. No, we were all tricked by the guys here. Shenye squatted down slowly, and found an untimely stone in the middle of the ground. Such a stone had never existed in the entire forest. Lu Ju and Minato looked at each other and shook their heads, not understanding why Shenye was so sure. At this time, Shenye finally understood why he couldn't feel the slightest flow of chakra, and why the dust here was so dense that it seemed that no one had appeared for several years. The crux of the problem is on this small stone, and Shenye is very sure that this stone contains the power of the seal. Take this stone with you and hand it over to the 3rd generation when you return to the village. Maybe all of this will be solved. Does no one here mean that our mission has failed? This is our first mission. Shenye shook his head. In fact, the mission was just beginning. After leaving the wooden house, Shenye rushed towards the direction of the forest. Although Lu Ju and Minato didn't know what was going on, they still followed behind Shenye. As Shenye expected, there are other houses nearby, and people can be seen from a distance. This is the place we're looking for. It's just a blindfold. It doesn't look like they're easy to mess with. The guys that go in and out of the house are typical bruisers, none of them look skinny. Even if you can't practice ninjutsu and use chakra, the power contained in it still looks very powerful, and it is not something that Shenye and others can deal with. Lu Ju, it's up to you now. Lu Ju nodded his head. After just a short period of contact, everyone has already formed some tacit understanding. Shadow binding technique. Lu Ju climbed over several tree trunks and stayed very close, extending the shadow under his feet to directly control the two outermost guys. Minato and Shenye looked at each other and landed on the edge of the house, tapped their feet on the ground and rushed into the house. Before the big men in the room had time to react, Shenye erupted with his own strange power and entangled them together. Minato pulled out a rope in his pocket to tie everyone together. 3 people surrounded these guys in the middle. How many of you are there? Everyone has been caught here by you. Who are you? What do you want to do? We should ask you, what is the purpose of suddenly appearing within the range of Muya village? Hearing the word Muya village, the eyes of the big man in the head changed obviously, and returned to normal in an instant. We don't know where this place belongs, we just hid here because we were hunted down by others. If you have anything to say, let's go back to the village and talk to those guys. We are just a few children. The corners of Shenya's mouth raised slightly, actively emphasizing the fact that he is a child, on the one hand lowering the opponent's defensiveness. On the other hand, these guys will definitely look for opportunities to escape, and they can see the ambition in their eyes at a glance, even though they have disguised it very well. However, new problems followed one after another. The 5 big men seemed not ready to cooperate, so there was no way to bring them back to the village. Minato, leave the mark of the flying thunder god on them. The 2 of us will take turns teleporting, and Lu Ju will be in charge of guarding them. Minato nodded, took out a shuriken and hung it on the rope, and threw another shuriken fiercely in the direction of Konoha village. The art of flying thunder god. Several people disappeared into the house, and when they reappeared, it was already a few miles away in the woods, with the shuriken thrown by Mazuman stuck in the trunk. Without staying too long, Shenyi and Minato performed the flying thunder god art one after another, and they got closer and closer to the village. Suddenly, the leader of the big man let out a roar, and a huge force broke out from his body and broke free from the rope, and the 5 people ran away in different directions. Minato and Lu Ju wanted to chase but were stopped by Shenye. Go back to the village, there are 5 of them, we only have 3 who can't catch them all in one go. But, the ninjas in the village will take care of it. We are just students who haven't graduated yet. We haven't become real ninjas yet. No one will blame us. Minato hesitated for a moment, but still obeyed Shenye's arrangement. He knew that Shenye would not deceive him, let alone harm him. By the way, the pebbles there have been brought back. It's always in my pocket. Let's hand it over to the 3rd generation now, and we will get the result before dawn. We just need to stay in the office. Without the 5 burly men, Shenye and the others traveled very fast, and returned to the village in just a few minutes. At this time, the village was pitch black, and no one could be seen walking on the street. The 3 of them rushed directly into Hokage's office. At this time, Sandai was looking out of the window anxiously. Pushing open the door, Sandai looked at Shenye and the others expectantly, only to find that the 3 little guys had empty hands. Didn't you bring those people back? I was escaped by those burly guys, but we have other gains. Oh, the eyes of the 3 generations showing differences are just ordinary people who have not been recorded in the book, and there will be unexpected gains. From this point of view, the news sent back by the ninja in front is not very accurate, and there are even many situations that have not been understood. Kamiya nodded to Shikaku, who took out the ninja tool from his pocket and disappeared and placed it on the table. The eyes of the 3rd generation were instantly attracted by the small stone, frowning from time to time, wondering what they were thinking about. There is a very strong sealing power on it, and it is definitely not something that ordinary people can accomplish. It is precisely because I saw these things that are wrong that I brought them back to you. You guys go back and rest first. It seems that this task needs to be completed by the Chunin in the village, and there will be some difficulties. Originally planned to wait for the final result here, but Shenyi suddenly changed his mind, turned around and walked outside. Minato and Lu Ju listened to Sandai's words and knew that this matter was beyond their control, so they simply left with Shenye. At least a few people today did not end up with the title of mission failure, and everything still needs to be considered in the long run. The 3 people went home in different directions, so they separated at the foot of the Shadow Rock. A few hours passed, and the next morning arrived as promised, and Shenyi stretched his lazy arms. Shenyi, you are awake, someone is looking for you outside. Tsunade appeared in front of Shenyi with a smirk on his face. The expression on his face was very ambiguous. Shenyi scratched his head in doubt. Someone was looking for him to make Tsunade's expression. What is it? After tidying up her clothes, Shenyi walked out of her room in a few steps. A familiar pretty voice in the living room was sitting on the sofa waiting. It's Maken, what's the reason for coming to see me so early? Can we go out and talk? Makoto cautiously pointed in the direction of the door, her eyes full of anticipation. This made Kamiya even more puzzled. Why Uchiha Makoto, who is usually arrogant and domineering, seems to be a different person, so timid. Shenyi nodded, pulled Makoto out of the room, and didn't stop until she reached a hidden corner. Maken lowered her head slightly and stared at her own toes. Her hands grasped the corners of her clothes and slowly twisted her body, looking very awkward. There's something to say now, there's no one else around. I'm sorry Shenyi, I've been the one who blamed you all this time. Isn't it too modest? And I never blamed you. But. Maken's face suddenly turned ruddy, and she buried her head deeper, not daring to raise her head and look at Shenyi. Shenyi shook his head helplessly, not understanding what was going on. Don't continue, but if you have anything to say, just say it, otherwise I will go back. Don't tell me about the mark on my butt, okay, this is my secret all along. Shenyi twitched the corners of his mouth twice, thinking it was something important. Even if Maken didn't take the initiative to find her, she wouldn't publicize such a thing. Gentleman's demeanor is the principle that Kamiya has always carried out to the end, not to mention Uchiha Makoto can be regarded as a good friend of himself in this world. Selling out a friend would definitely not be something that Shenyi could do. I promise you. Thank you, Shenyi, may I treat you to eel ramen tonight? Shenyi nodded, knowing that Maken still had a very important practice, so she didn't hold her back. Looking at Maken's bouncing back, he knew that Maken had completely untied a knot in her heart. Neither of them noticed that there was a short guy hiding from the edge of the corner, and he heard all the conversations between the two of them. Choosing the opposite direction from Makoto, Kamiya walked towards Hokage's office. Although the third generation had ordered more advanced ninjas to perform tasks, Shenyi was very curious about that little stone. Staying below and looking at the window of the office, just happened to collide with the eyes of the third generation. Sandai smiled and raised his hand to gently push open the window, then turned his body sideways and walked towards the table. Shenyi slightly arched his body, condensed chakra under his feet, and landed by the window of the office after a few consecutive jumps. At this time, there was only one person in the office, the third generation, and the small stone was still placed on the table. Did you find anything among the pebbles? The third generation shook his head. The stone did have a strong sealing power, but it was still an ordinary stone after it was untied. Perhaps even such a seal is just a cover-up. We have been deceived too much. What the hell is going on? Further observation is needed to draw conclusions, and ninjas have been sent to track down those guys. Shenyi nodded, picked up the stone and put it in the palm of his hand to examine it carefully, but there was really nothing special about it. I thought there would be a world hidden in a small pebble, but that's all. Even the first generation dare not say that it can do this easily. At the same time, the guy who eavesdropped on the conversation between Kamiya and Makoto quickly ran to the Uchiha family, paced back and forth at the door, and waited anxiously. After a while, Fuyu walked out of the door wearing a light cloth clothes. Master Fuyu, you have finally come out. I just overheard the hateful Kamiya talking with Makoto. He actually knows the mark on Miss Makoto's ass. Fuyu frowned, even he didn't know about such things. If the guy in front of him hadn't said it at this time, Fuyu would have no idea that Makoto's butt has this natural mark. Fuyu, who didn't like Shenyi at all, suddenly changed his face, and clenched his fists fiercely. The guy who made the small report trembled and didn't dare to say anything more, for fear that Fuyu would attack him in a fit of anger. Trying to calm down his emotions, Fuyu took a deep breath. It's still thanks to you, this is considered a reward for you. Fuyu took out a small gray pill from his pocket and handed it to the guy in front of him, the latter's eyes suddenly glowed. Back at his home, Fuyu became more and more angry. The girl I have always liked was actually looked at by Shenyi first, and I couldn't swallow this bad breath no matter what. However, at this time, the children in the Ninja Academy are the key protection objects of Muya village, and attacking them now will definitely cause dissatisfaction in the village. In Fu Yu's heart, even if Shenyi participated in the capture of the enemy, he was still a piece of trash. Let you be arrogant for a while, and I will definitely teach you a good lesson when you graduate from Ninja Academy. You may even die because of your negligence. The expression on Uchiha Fugaku's face became more ferocious, as if he had seen the situation where Kamiya fell on the ground and could not move. Then Shenyi didn't know anything about it, and didn't realize that he was being targeted. A few days passed in the blink of an eye, and there was still no news of the capture of the 5 big men in the village. Shenyi gradually forgot about this task. One day, a brand new face appeared at the Ninja Academy, with particularly dazzling white hair. This new guy doesn't look very annoying, and I've never heard of this guy before. Shenyi folded his hands on his chest and quietly listened to the discussion of the people around him. In fact, he already knew who that guy was. Even though he is young now, he can still tell his identity from the corners of his face. Hatake Sakumo, a ninja known as Konoha Bega in the future, ended up being depressed by his duties in the village because he gave up his mission to save his companions. Minato, although this guy looks very cold, he is definitely the same guy as you in his bones. I can't see that there will be a side that is close to people. Shenya shook his head lightly and didn't explain anything. He stood up directly and walked to Hatake Sakumo's side in a few steps, and stretched out his palm actively. Hi, my name is Shenyi. Hi, I'm Sakumo Hatake, in order to prepare to become Hokage's man. What, you actually want to take my Hokage position? I won't promise you. Minato rushed up in an instant, waved his fist in midair, and looked at Sakumo Hatake with a provocative face. For those who want to compete for Hokage's position, they are all opponents in Minato's heart. Fortunately, Shenya and Lu Ju don't have such thoughts. Shenya took Hatake Sakumo to join his team and sat not far from the window. The appearance of the teacher interrupted the discussion in the classroom, gave a brief introduction to Sakumo Hatake, and started a new day of teaching. However, neither Shenyi nor Minato and the others had any thoughts in the classroom, and they were already looking at the window not far away and started to move around. Are you guys planning to escape from the classroom? Do you want to join together, since you have seen through our thoughts? Hatake Sakumo rubbed his chin, pretended to think for a moment, then nodded solemnly. Shenyi felt a little more fond of Hatake Sakumo, and was able to join the truancy team on the first day after entering the Ninja Academy. Minato and Shikahisa gave Hatake Sakumo a thumbs up at the same time. As Shenyi said, he is not an honest guy. Taking advantage of the moment when the teacher turned around and didn't pay attention, the 4 jumped over the window one after another and landed on the playground. However, Sakumo Hatake's movements were much less familiar than those of the others, and he staggered a few times and almost fell down. Looks like you need some practice. Behavior like this happens almost every day. I'm curious, how can your ninjutsu improve without the teaching of the academy? Lu Ju and Minato set their eyes on Shenyi, with expressions that you understand. Hatake Sakumo still shook his head in comprehension, but he was not at all worried about escaping from the academy and not getting what he should learn. You will understand this matter later. We have a very important task to carry out today. Remember the 5 big men who escaped? Of course I remember. I have always wanted to capture them back. There has been no movement for such a long time. It seems that the village has gradually forgotten about this incident. Now we will attack. Several people hit it off and ran quickly along the streets of the village. Hatake followed behind these 3 people suspiciously. Although he didn't know what made these guys so anxious, he still followed. After all, when I saw Shenyi for the first time, I felt very familiar from the bottom of my heart. If Shenyi hadn't taken the initiative to appear in front of him at that time, maybe Hatake Mosaku would have walked to Shenya's side and sat down in the next second. After a while, the 4 of them came to the woods outside the village. Such a long time has passed, and it is impossible to find the trace. We have to go back there and observe. Minato nodded, took the initiative to lead the way, and quickly jumped forward along the route in his mind. Observing the situation in the surrounding woods, Shenyi noticed something was wrong. It was dark at that time, so the observation was not as careful as it is now. The trees along the road were more or less damaged to varying degrees. And these destructions are only along this route, which is the destination that he is about to arrive at. Shen Yi was very puzzled, like some kind of signal guiding people to go there. We're slowing down a little bit, it doesn't look like the road ahead is going to be easy. Minato nodded, stayed on the tree trunk, looked around to make sure there was no danger, and then continued to move forward slowly. Along the destroyed road, several people finally arrived at the house located in the woods, but there was no one inside. Those burly men did not come back here. There is no one here at all. We have discovered that those guys will not come back here again. Be careful and observe, maybe there will be some unexpected gains, this matter will be left to Hatake Sakumo. Hatake Sakumo nodded, and fell to the ground slowly, looking for clues. He had heard about the mission here before he entered the ninja academy, but he didn't really take it to heart. Unexpectedly, within a day, he would be concerned about him, and he couldn't help but become more curious about Shenye in his heart. Although everyone is a student of the ninja academy, what Shenye has shown has far exceeded the thinking that this age should have. Walking into the house, Mao Shuo saw at a glance that there had been a brief dispute here, but it was crushed unilaterally and there was no resistance. Just as everyone's eyes were focused on the house, a mysterious figure in the distance hid in the dark and watched these little guys quietly. The short-sighted guy actually came here again, ruining my plan and almost taking my sacrifice away. These few words seem to be squeezed out between this guy's teeth, and he can clearly feel the deep hatred. Unaware, Shenye and his party expanded the scope of their search and decided to take a look around. Shenye, I have a new discovery here. Minato jumped up to the top of the tree and waved his hands in all directions. When the others heard Minato's call, they turned around and ran towards that side, and regrouped after a while. Looking at the altar surrounded by countless bushes, Shenye frowned. If it weren't for the indiscriminate search at this moment, the existence of this altar would never have been found, which is enough to show how secret it is. Since it's hidden here, it means that the guys who made him don't want to be discovered. Maybe those 5 guys are just tool people. I have some research on the altar, let me take a closer look. Hatake Sakumo slowly squatted down, mobilizing the chakra in his body to gather bit by bit on the palm of his hand, and patted it lightly on the altar. The altar emitted a faint light, and a burst of suction appeared in the middle of the altar. Minato and Shikaku staggered and were almost sucked in. But Shenye didn't feel anything, just bursts of majesty blowing past his ears. Hatake Sakumo quickly stopped what he was doing, turned around and looked at Kamiya. Looking at the expression on his face, Shenye knew that there would be trouble, and the altar was far beyond the scope of everyone's comprehension. 5 sacrifices are needed to increase one's own strength. Such an altar is not allowed in Konoha village, and will even be condemned in the entire ninja world. It's better to go back to the village and report this matter to the 3 generations of adults. We can't handle it with our current abilities. I'm afraid you have no chance to leave here. Since you discovered this secret, it's better to keep it as a sacrifice. The 4 little guys can reluctantly accept it. The guy who had been hiding in the dark found that his altar was exposed, and couldn't bear it, and stepped out of the darkness to appear in front of everyone. Shenye shook his head helplessly. After all, he still had to go through a battle. Sure enough, this task was not that simple. Leaving us depends on your strength. You only have 1 person, but we are 4. 4 little guys who are not even genin, want to fight with me, did I hear some big joke? Shenye folded her arms around her chest, wondering what was going on in her heart. Minato stepped forward to confront that guy, but was dragged behind him by Shenye. After a few steps, Shenye walked in front of everyone, looked up at the guy in front of him and moved his lips. Who are you? Who am I? I am the enemy of Konoha village, the god of killing who will end your lives today, little ones. I'm asking for your name, so that I can leave a grave for you after you die. Greek verses. Shenye scratched his head, he had no impression of this name at all. No matter in the original book or after traveling here, the name Greece is still a strange existence in his mind. Shenye didn't choose to attack the unknown enemy directly, after all, he didn't know the strength of this guy, so he needed to test it out slowly. But Grease Bai was very anxious, stepping on the ground and rushing towards Shenye suddenly. Shenyi, be careful. Minato rushed towards Shenyi, but was still a step too late. Greaseby had already stopped in front of Shenyi. The palms were like pliers grabbing Shenyi's neck, ready to strike the enemy with a move, but he didn't expect Shenyi to simply turn his head and dodge. There are some differences in the Greek ratio. It is just a child who has such a reaction speed. At this time, Minato had arrived behind Shenyi, and he clenched his fists and waved continuously towards Hokage. In desperation, Grebi had no choice but to retreat his body to avoid the attack from the water gate. The fist hit the air, and Kamiya patted Minato on the shoulder and gave Shikaku and Hatake a look. Although he had just joined the team not long ago, Hatake Sakumo could fully understand Kamiya's intentions, so he distanced himself from Shikaku and surrounded Hubby. The four people surrounded Grease, which made Grease even happier. If these four little guys are close together, it may be difficult to take them all down, but if they are separated, they can be broken one by one. Earth escape, the landslide technique. Helibi stood on the spot and started to make seals with his hands. The surrounding ground began to shake faintly, and suddenly a huge gap opened in the ground. The ground under the feet of Shenyi and the others slowly rose into the air, tending to move closer together. Strange power. Shenyi swung his fist and hit the soil directly under his feet, and the huge force slowly spread out along the place where the fist touched the ground. Accompanied by the rumbling sound, the stones were scattered into countless pebbles, and Shenyi jumped a few times and fell to the ground. The other three people did not have the ability to control power as delicately as Shenyi, so they also chose to jump out of the range of the stone. Humph! Greaseby snorted coldly, and sped up his movements. The stones finally collided together, but there was no loud noise as imagined, but a bigger stone formed and smashed towards Shenyi. In his secret observation, he had already determined that Shenyi was the leader of these guys. As the saying goes, capture the thief first and capture the king first. Shenyi curled her lips. It turns out that this guy's target has always been himself, and all his actions just now were just foreshadowing. Such a huge stone, even with the use of strange power and some multiplication techniques, there is no way to resolve it, so it can only be avoided temporarily. Watergate. Learn. The Watergate responded, and flung the imprinted chakra in one direction at will. The art of flying thunder god. Before the shuriken stopped, Kamiya's figure disappeared in place and appeared in midair. One hand grabbed the shuriken thrown by Minato and fell to the ground. The huge rock hit the ground, shaking the surrounding ground. I didn't expect you to run away so fast, but then I won't let such good luck escape. My sacrifice was robbed by you, right? That's right, just a few of us, so what? Shenyi put his hands on his waist and looked at Greaseby. Although this guy looks very strong at this time, he still has the possibility of victory. Looks like we need a different approach. Minato nodded. Relying on ordinary fighting methods really can't do anything to this guy. The technique of multiplying part of the strange power. Shenyi leapt into the air, his entire right arm instantly became extremely huge, and fell straight towards Grease. Tips for carving insects. Helibi completely underestimated the power of Shenyi, and instead of dodging, he went straight to meet him. When the small fist met the fist at an incomparable distance, Greaseby's whole body was instantly bombarded by force, and bounced back to the ground like a bullet. With a rumbling sound, a huge gully appeared on the ground, and Grease was lying motionless in the gully. It won't end so easily, it's too boring. Shenyi stood on the edge of the ravine and looked into the depths. Hexabe twisted his body twice and slowly stood up. His eyes were full of anger. He never thought that such a small body could burst out with such a powerful force, making himself deflated. There was a hint of disbelief in the anger. It seems to you guys that you need to be more serious, and you are able to erupt with such a powerful force. Millennium Kill. Hatake Sakumo took this opportunity to quietly appear behind Hubby, with his hands together, leaving only 2 fingers outside. In an instant, Greaseby's face tightened. In Shenya's sight, Greaseby at this moment seemed to be standing in a pan of oil, his face flushed and ready to erupt at any moment. What? Shouts came out of his mouth, and Grease flew up into the sky and fell to the ground again. Only Sakumo Hatake with a mean face was left in the ravine. His half-squatting posture was still maintaining the heroism of 1,000 years of killing. Greaseby clutched his buttocks and paced back and forth, only feeling that the chrysanthemum was in great pain, and the tears in the corners of his eyes were ready to stay. It's over for you. You humiliated me like this. It's your honor to let you feel the highest meaning of Teishu. It's the first time to use it in actual combat. The effect is very good. Although everyone's common enemy is grease, Shenya and the others still feel the chrysanthemum is cold, and subconsciously hide their ass behind Hatake Sakumo. Shenyi grinned, never expecting that Hatake Sakumo would use the Millennium Kill at this time. Hatake, well done. It's a small thing, it seems even more unacceptable to directly defeat him if you don't match him. Minato and Shikaku couldn't help giving a thumbs up to Hatake Sakumo, already full of admiration in their hearts. At the same time, the two warned themselves in their hearts not to provoke Hatake Sakumo at any time. After all, chrysanthemums are very fragile. After an unknown amount of time, Rebi finally regained his composure, rubbed his buttocks and raised his finger to Sakumo Hatake. Boy, you managed to get my attention. He originally wanted to capture the thief first, but Hatake Sakumo's humiliation to him forced him to change his target. Water escape, the technique of water bullets. Rebi made mudras with both hands, condensing the chakra in his body and gathering them in his mouth. Looking at it now, Grease Bijayan's movements are very awkward for some reason, and his legs are tightly closed together, more like a woman. Suddenly, a jet of water appeared from his mouth and rushed towards Sakumo Hatake in the ravine. The speed was so fast that it was too late for Hatake Sakumo to dodge, only the rushing water column remained in his eyes. Too done, Tulu is back. Hatake Sakumo squatted down and clapped his hands on the ground. The ground in front of him began to move, and a wall a few centimeters thick was erected. The water column hit the soil wall, and the huge impact almost broke the wall, but it was still blocked in the end. There are still 2 times, but the next one will not be so lucky. That's exactly what we want to tell you. Shenyi and Minato looked at each other and nodded, then rushed towards hubby in 2 different directions, and came to his side within a few breaths. Almost at the same time, the 2 of them swung their fists and slammed Grease on the head. Greaseby snorted coldly, stepped back suddenly to avoid the attack, and at the same time opened his palm to grab the arms of the 2 people. Feeling the force from his arm, Shenyi knew that if he couldn't break free quickly, he might be crushed by this guy. At this moment, the 3 formed a triangle and stayed in place. Only the strength from their hands proved that the battle was still going on. Boy, if you don't want to die, just obediently become my sacrifice. Living is much better than dying. Innocent. Shenye firmly grasped the ground with 1 foot, and kicked hubby's stomach with the other foot along the air. After all, it is still difficult to defeat 4 hands with 2 fists. After a few rounds, Greekby found that he was the one who would suffer if he continued, so he decided to increase the distance of the battle. Taking advantage of the opportunity of punching, Greaseby retreated backwards, but he didn't know that the trap was already waiting for him. Shadow Binding Technique. Luju has been looking for opportunities to perform ninjutsu, and there is only one chance to succeed. Otherwise, it will be difficult for this guy to control again when he becomes vigilant. The shadow under the feet rushed along the ground to the feet of Helenby, and the black shadow wrapped around the upper body along the hands of Helenby. I'm not reconciled to being tricked by you 2 little fellows. So what if you're not reconciled? Do you want to break free and continue fighting with us? Give up, and with the seamless cooperation, you will only be injured. Shenyi tapped hubby on the head, with a mocking expression on his face. After all, the guy in front of him seemed to have the strength above Chunin, but he was easily captured by 4 little guys who hadn't graduated from Ninja Academy. Greek then rolled his eyes, and suddenly changed his attitude. Now I know that you guys are very powerful. You have such strength at such a young age and have a bright future. Mappy, are you trying to trick us into letting you go and teach us how to use the altar? How do you know? Grease was overjoyed instantly on his face, thinking that he had hope of regaining his freedom. At that time, as long as you simply tell about the altar, you can still quietly let them become sacrifices, and you will eventually get benefits. However, what greeted Grease was indeed a burst of chestnut from Shenye, and the sound resounded through the entire forest. I think you are thinking of farting. This crooked way still wants to seduce us. Crooked ways. Do you know how much strength will be increased by absorbing the power from the altar? Do you understand that I can be promoted to Jonin in an instant? Shenyi curled his lips. A ninja who needs to rely on the power of the altar to be promoted to Jonin is really rubbish. Grease will stagnate in its entire life, and will not give him another chance to open the altar. Perhaps the escape of those 5 burly men was a good thing, otherwise, they might have already become dead souls under the altar. Alright, let's take him back to the village and wait for the 3rd generation. This approach has already angered the bottom line of the ninja, enough to execute him. Shen Yi deliberately frightened Grease by, in fact, he didn't know how the 3rd generation would deal with this guy. Perhaps after getting the desired information from his mouth, Grease by completely lost its function and was thrown into the cage of Konoha village to spend his life. But how do we take him back? None of us can use the sealing technique to restrain his chakra. Yeah, we can't keep using the shadow binding technique to pester him, we still need some other methods. Shen Yi rubbed his chin, he didn't think about such a thing before, it seems that he needs to think of a perfect method. After thinking about it, Shen Yi decided to use the most primitive and violent method to prevent Grease from his urge to escape. Seeing Shen Yi approaching him with a smirk on his face, Hexabe swallowed, faintly aware that something bad was about to happen. Sure enough, Shen Yi raised his fist high, delicately controlled the chakra above the fist to increase his strength, and landed directly on Hebrebi's head. With a bang, Grease by twisted his body and slowly leaned on the shadow bound on his body. You can put away ninjutsu. I believe this guy won't wake up until Hokage's office. Wily is really a very good ninjutsu. Shen Yi shook his fist, appreciating contentedly. Minato was a little overwhelmed. At this time, both Kamiya and Hatake Sakumo looked very scary, and they were not existences that could be easily provoked. Fortunately, I and these 2 terrible guys are teammates, if they are enemies, they will definitely die very badly. Set off. There are still some things that need to be done before leaving. You can't leave that altar behind. Minato nodded, and jumped to the side of the altar, looking at the altar with a faint light, lost in thought, and didn't know what to do for a while. Sakumo Hatake, I'll leave it to you to sabotage. I don't have much experience. Hatake Sakumo gave Minato a blank look, picked up a stone at his feet and threw it directly into the altar, and the stone landed right in the middle of the altar. A rumbling sound appeared. The light in the altar stopped abruptly, and cracks visible to the naked eye spread outward along the center point. Clapping his hands, Hatake Sakumo turned around and followed Shen Yi back to the village. Minato spread his hands and followed behind. After walking a long distance, there was a loud explosion sound from the direction of the altar, and the corner of Hatake Sakumo's mouth slightly raised. Real men never look back at explosions. You should all admire me now. Shen Yi twitched the corners of his mouth twice, making sure that he was not wrong about Hatake Sakumo at the time. Once he got acquainted with him, he would become like Namikaze Minato. However, the atmosphere at this time is indeed much more relaxed. The task that has been pressing on everyone's minds has been completely over, and it is still done by myself. Looking at the Greek figure on Lu Ju's shoulder, Shen Yi couldn't help feeling a strange feeling in his heart. At this time, he had truly integrated into this world. After a period of rushing, several people finally returned to the village. Standing at the entrance of the village, Aoba Yamashiro looked at several little guys who suddenly appeared with different eyes. After all, there was another strange guy on Minato's shoulder. You guys are not in the ninja academy, what did you do when you left the village? Brother Shancheng, don't you see that the guy carrying Minato doesn't understand? We helped the village complete a very important task. Yamashiro Aoba nodded, and looked up and down Grease. He found that there was a very obvious beating mark on his head, and he couldn't help but show a different look. Without wasting too much time here, Shen Yi and the others rushed directly to Hokage's office, preparing to hand Grease over to the 3rd generation. At this time, several ninjas from the village gathered in the office, and it seemed that the 3rd generation called a few people to come to a meeting. Pushing open the door, all eyes were on Shen Yi. Shen Yi scratched his head in embarrassment and turned away. Today's protagonist is not me, you should still look at this guy. Minato put the unconscious Greek guy on the ground and wiped the sweat from his forehead. It was a waste of energy to carry this guy all the way back. What's going on? Who is this guy? The 5 burly men who ran away before that were because of this guy, and they were sacrifices to this guy. Sacrifice. The 3rd generation frowned, not expecting the matter to be so serious. Involving human sacrifices is no longer something that can be tolerated in the ninja world. Shenyi nodded and explained the whole process. Everyone in the room gave thumbs up one after another, and looked at the little guys in front of them with a look of relief. This is the future of Muya village. At a young age, he can already work together to subdue an enemy who is several times stronger than himself, and his future prospects are limitless. However, there was no expression on Sandai's face, and even a hint of blame filled his eyes. Do you know how dangerous it is to do this? If you encounter a more powerful enemy, you may not be able to return to the village today, you know. Don't worry, 3 generations, we have a sense of proportion, and it is our honor to be able to contribute to the village. Leave this guy to us. Although this behavior is very risky, I still have to reward you for completing the task perfectly. Minato's eyes suddenly shone. He had already tasted the sweetness once, and he would not be shy this time. He had already thought about what kind of reward he would get. However, the 3rd generation just took out 4 scrolls in the corner of the room and handed them to Shenyi. Here are 4 tailor-made ninjutsu for you. It can be regarded as a reward for this operation. In the future, there is no order from the village not to take such risks, you know. Knowing the 3 generations of adults, we will definitely obey the orders of the village in the future. After the little guys left, bursts of laughter erupted in the room, and the expressions on the faces of the 3rd generation stretched out in an instant. The boys really didn't disappoint me. 3 generations of wise men, it seems that you have already planned to arrange Sakumo Hatake to the Ninja Academy. The 3rd generation nodded undeniably, and then set their sights on Greece, with contempt in their eyes. At this moment, Shenyi didn't know that this action had already been carried out under the watchful eyes of many people. If there were some accidents during the battle with Greece at that time, the ninjas of Konoha village would appear immediately to save him. Standing at the corner of the street, the 4 people separated in different directions, and each person's departure route was different. Back home, Tsunade had already prepared a table of sumptuous food and waited for him. Come back, Shenyi, did you gain anything today? Shenyi suddenly patted himself on the forehead, put all the scrolls handed to him by the 3rd generation into his pockets, and forgot to distribute them to everyone when they parted. However, they have already returned home, so it is better to wait until the next time we meet to deliver them to our hands. There is still a little harvest, but I don't know what kind of ninjutsu the scrolls that the 3 generations of adults handed over to us are. Don't worry, he must have tailored it for you, and it is suitable for everyone's practice. Shenyi nodded. His stomach already felt hungry after a busy day, and he quickly started to eat. Watching Shenyi's gobbling action, Tsunade was a little preoccupied for a moment, and his younger brother appeared in his mind unconsciously. Thinking about it, some tears remained in the corners of his eyes, and even Tsunade didn't realize that his emotions were a little out of control. Shenya slowly raised her head and noticed Tsunade's strangeness, and hurriedly stepped forward to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes. Did Tsunade's sister think of something bad? Don't be sad when I'm here. No, I'm just happy to see you. Time passed quickly, and the sky outside gradually darkened. Shenye pushed open the door and walked directly into the bed, closing his eyes. After a while, a slight snore sounded in the room. Early the next morning, Hatake Sakumo squatted in front of the window of Shenye's room and gently knocked on the window. Shenye, it's time to go to school. Opening his hazy eyes, Shenye found the figure in front of the window instantly refreshed, and shook his head helplessly when he found out that it was Sakumo Hatake. This is the first time I have seen such a strange way of waking up, and I am afraid that only Sakumo Hatake would choose this way. Thinking about Hatake Sakumo's vigorous posture, an idea suddenly popped up in Shenya's mind, which just fits the original work perfectly. Hatake Sakumo, a genius ninja in the village, was promoted to a ninja at a young age and became the team leader of Onbi members, performing countless tasks. However, now he has been placed in the Ninja Academy for 3 generations, which limits his growth and performance. On the way to the Ninja Academy, Kamiya decided to test Hatake Sakumo's thoughts. If he was determined to follow him to graduate from the Ninja Academy, there was no way. Do you have any plans for the future? Will you become Hokage step by step? Being Hokage is my dreamland, but I know it won't be me in the end. Compared with me, Minato is more suitable for this position. Shenya nodded. It seems that Hatake Sakumo knew very well that he was not that material, and he had no intention of competing with Minato for Hokage's position. With your ability, you can have a better development after leaving the Ninja Academy. Don't you have any curiosity about the mysterious organization in the village? Oh, you mean Onbi, right? Shenya nodded. In fact, he also has selfish intentions, and Hatake Sakumo joining Anbu can restrict some Danzo's actions towards him, although he is not afraid of them. Hatake Sakumo suddenly stopped and looked in the direction of Hokage's office. Not only was Hokage there, but Onbi's base was also there. It's not up to me to decide where I go or stay. Even coming to Ninja Academy is the arrangement of 3 generations of adults. 3 generations, Shenya frowned. This was the first time he heard Hatake Sakumo mention this matter. That's right, everyone has already known about the existence of Grebi, so they sent me to the Ninja Academy to perform missions with you. Shenyi was even more puzzled. The old guy from the 3rd generation had already said that the mission was beyond his reach and he needed to send more advanced ninjas to carry it out. But he was doing these small tricks in secret, but after thinking about it carefully, all the tricks ultimately benefited his group. Some of Shenye can't understand the 3rd generation. It turns out that everyone already knew it, so you too. Hatake Sakumo nodded without hiding anything, thinking that this was just a task assigned to him by the 3rd generation. But during this period of contact, Hatake Sakumo has deeply regarded these few people as his closest friends. The reason why Kamiya appeared in front of the window early in the morning was to set foot on the road to Ninja Academy with Kamiya alone. Even if Shenya didn't ask about his plans for the future, Hatake Sakumo would still tell the whole story, and he didn't want to hide anything from Shenya. I am very happy to be able to work with you during this period of time. Perhaps this is our last cooperative action. Shenye couldn't help but give this guy a blank look. In his heart, Shenye also regarded him as a friend in this world, otherwise he would never go on missions with him. What are you talking about? If you are a good friend, don't say such frustrating words. You should also explain this news to Minato and Luju in person. Shenya put his arms around Hatake Sakumo's shoulders, and lightly beat him a few times with his fists. Hatake Sakumo felt his heart warm, and finally found the feeling of being valued. As soon as he walked into the gate of the academy, he saw Minato and Luju waving from a distance. The two looked at each other and quickened their pace and walked over there. Gathering them together, Shenyi took out the scrolls bestowed by the 3 generations and spread them on the ground. I haven't seen these scrolls yet. Everyone choose the ninjutsu that they think is suitable to take back. You choose first. Then I'm welcome. Minato flipped through it a few times, chose one and put it in his own ninjutsu pocket. Shikahisa and Hatake Sakumo also chose the ninjutsu scrolls they thought were suitable and put them in their pockets. Hatake Sakumo told Minato and Shikahisa about his plans to leave the academy. The latter expresses great reluctance, but it cannot interfere with the fate of another person because of one person's reasons. I wanted to spend the last day together peacefully and happily, but I didn't expect to find another strange guy among the teachers. Hatake Sakumo couldn't take his eyes off the first time he saw him, and Shenya could clearly feel the chakra surging in his body ready to move. There is a possibility of an explosion at any time. Shenyi is very curious about what kind of guy will make Hatake Sakumo have such a big reaction. Looking over there, a guy in green clothes stood at the door of the classroom with blank eyes, looking into the classroom with a trace of hesitation. This is Matt Day. Shenyi, do you know him too? The two of us are very good partners. Shenyi twitched the corners of his mouth twice. Hatake Sakumo gritted his teeth. It was impossible to tell that the two were very good friends. It is said that Shenyi, the lifelong enemy, will believe it, but Shenyi still knows the previous situation of the two of them very well, and the original book has already explained it very clearly. Before Shenya could react, Hatake Sakumo rushed up and wrestled with Mad Dai in an instant. Shenya quietly watched the two people's fists and kicks. At this moment, he realized how strong Hatake Sakumo is, which can be compared with Mad Dai who specializes in physical arts. Just as the two were fighting fiercely, a ninja with a mask jumped into the middle of the two and separated them directly. Stop messing around. Master Danzo is going to order me to take you back. The mission in the Ninja Academy has been completed. Hatake Sakumo looked at Kamiya reluctantly, and left the Ninja Academy behind the Onbi members. Maidadai was stunned for a while. not understanding what happened, why he was taken away by others all of a sudden. Shenyi shook his head lightly and took a few steps to Mate Dai's side. The two of you are good friends, so from now on you will be our good friends too. It's no big deal if you can't practice ninjutsu. Do you know me? Mate Dai pointed to his nose in shock. Obviously he had never seen this guy before. Of course, you will be a very good ninja in the future. Actually, I'm just the tail of a crane. I couldn't practice ninjutsu, so I was forced to leave the ninja academy. I came back only to graduate. But your strength has far surpassed many of us who are still in the ninja academy, so be more confident in yourself. Mate Dai nodded again and again, and he knew very well in his heart what differentiated him from others. Since it is impossible to practice ninjutsu, then put a lot of effort into taijutsu to prove that relying on simple taijutsu can also become an excellent ninja. Minato and Shikajiu had already walked into the classroom at this time, unaware that a new member had joined the team. Shenyi patted Mate Dai on the shoulder, gestured with his eyes, and the two of them walked into the classroom more than you. At the same time, Shenyi silently activated the systematic stealing skills in his heart. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully stealing the skill of Mate Dai, the 8 art of armor. Stealing skill cooling time, 3 hours. It was still a long 3 hours, and Shenyi couldn't help asking the system when this time could be shortened. But there was no response, and the question seemed to disappear. The boring classroom life started. Only Mate Dai listened to the teacher's explanation seriously, and recorded what was written on the paper from time to time. The eyes of the three of Shenyi have been watching the scenery outside the window, and they can't help but want to rush out to play. However, at this moment, 3 pieces of chalk flew over and landed on everyone's forehead with precision, leaving a light white mark. You 3 guys, be honest with me. Don't think that I don't know your little thoughts. It is impossible to leave in my class. Don't worry teacher, we won't leave. Shenyi raised her hand to assure her, but her eyes still fell outside the window, thinking about when she would be able to graduate from here and leave. There will be countless tasks waiting for you to become a true ninja, and then you will be absolutely free. Shenyi, I think it's better for us to be more serious today. Maybe from today we can leave the academy unscrupulously. Oh, why so sure? A mysterious smile appeared on Minato's face. Before that, he had inquired clearly that what he learned today was the technique of shadow clone. If you can easily and proficiently use the shadow clone technique, you can create a shadow clone to go to school, and the main body can play unscrupulously outside. Why not do it? Shenyi patted his forehead. Why didn't he think of this ninjutsu earlier? However, after using the stealing skill of the system just now, it still needs to wait for a while before continuing to use it. There is a chance of stealing the technique of shadow clone. There is not much time left until you graduate. As the only assessment content is to be able to perform the complete shadow clone technique, I will hand over this ninjutsu to you today. The teacher stood in front of the podium and taught all the content about the shadow clone technique. Mate Dai swallowed his saliva and felt that it was very tricky. He didn't have any talent for ninjutsu at all. The shadow clone technique was even more difficult for him, and it could even be said to be impossible. It turned out to be the technique of shadow clone. Could it be that I can't become a ninja in my whole life? God is not fair. I will help you solve this problem. That kind of ninjutsu is not enough to be the standard for judging a person's strength. Shenyi stood up with a solemn expression and walked towards the podium. On weekdays, Mate Dai has suffered so much staring and ridicule because he can't use ninjutsu. Shenyi doesn't want such things to continue to happen. So he chose to come to the teacher's side and speak in a low voice, so as not to cause other people's ruthless ridicule. Student Shenyi, if you have any problems, you can just stand in your seat and say it. You don't need to come to me. This matter must be said in your ear, otherwise I am worried that I will not be able to control my temper. Although there was a slight smile on his face, everyone could feel that there was no doubt in Shenyi's words. The teacher sighed lightly and didn't say anything, waiting for Shenyi to come to him, and he was also very curious about what he would explain to him. Teacher, do you know Mate Dai? Shenyi whispered in the teacher's ear with a very small voice. The classroom was so quiet that one could hear a needle drop to the ground, but the others could only watch Shenyi's lips move, not knowing what to say. The teacher's eyes changed, and he unconsciously looked at the guy in the green combat uniform over there. The technique of shadow clone will not be the only evidence. In the end, there will be many methods of research, so you don't need to worry about anything at all. Shenyi nodded reassuringly, so that there is no need to worry about Matt Day's graduation. After all, his strength can easily become a ninja. The day passed quickly. Shenyi shook his head, feeling somewhat tired. Jingle bell. When the school bell rang, Minato and Shikaju rushed out of the classroom like wild horses, stood on the playground and waited for a while but still did not see Kamiya appear. The two of them couldn't help being very curious. Normally, Shenyi rushed out first. What's going on with this guy Shenyi today? It seems like a different person. Let's go back and have a look. Maybe we're waiting for Matt Dai, but this guy didn't come out either. Following the route they left, the two of them went through layers of people and returned to the village, only to find Shenyi leaning on a chair with his eyes closed. Matt Dai on the side looked down at something with his head down, looking very serious. After walking a few steps, Minato finally heard a slight snoring sound coming from Shenyi's mouth, unexpectedly fell asleep in a short time. Matt Dai, what are you looking at here? I still have a lot of things I don't understand about what the teacher said today. I want to ask Shenyi for advice, but he has already fallen asleep. If you don't understand, let me explain it to you. Although I didn't listen carefully, I already understand today's content. Matt Dai nodded and handed the things he recorded to Minato, and he had circled all the places he didn't understand. Minato looked at the content above, and couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth twice. I thought it was just some esoteric questions, but I didn't expect that Matt Dai used a big circle to draw all the content in the middle. I really can't figure out why Matt Dai is so ignorant of ninjutsu. However, as his good friend, Minato still answered all the questions for Matt Dai one by one carefully, without any impatience. The sky gradually darkened, and the stomachs of the three people made gurgling sounds at the same time, and Madokai gently rubbed his own stomach. Some are hungry. Do you want to wake up Shenyi to eat something? This guy is really, he has slept for so long with only this position. Minato shook his head helplessly, and pushed Kamiya a few times. Opening his eyes, Shenyi looked at the few people in front of him with different eyes, but he didn't expect to fall asleep here. Why didn't you wake me up earlier? I solved some learning problems for Mate Dai, and I called you when everyone was hungry just after the end. Standing up and stretching their waists, a group of people walked towards the direction of Yil Ramen. As soon as he walked out of the academy, Matt Dai jumped onto the roof with a single leap. After doing several somersaults in a row, he stood upside down with his fingers on the roof. We can't let go of a little time for practice. We will meet in Leela. There are still handstands to complete the task today. Shenyi knew Matt Dai's hard work, so he walked forward without saying anything, but Minato and Shikaju looked at Matt Dai with admiration. Both of them secretly asked themselves whether they could reach such a level. The answer is absolutely yes. He will not be as self-disciplined as Matt Dai, even if he works hard. Amidst the laughter, the figures of several people gradually disappeared in the dark street. Early the next morning, Shenyi was awakened by a hasty knock on the door, opened the door and saw Hatake Sakumo standing at the door, panting heavily. What happened in such a hurry? Could it be that someone bullied you in Anbu? Shenyi rolled up his sleeves, with a very clear intention to fight for Hatake Sakumo. Things are not what you imagined, but there is a very urgent task that needs your help. As a member of Anbu, I need Danzo's order to dispatch. Shenyi nodded and understood Hatake Sakumo's intentions, asked about the specifics of the mission, and left home. In fact, this task is not Anbu's task, nor is it a task sent by the third generation, but Hatake Sakumo accidentally came into contact with it. As a mission reward, it is a ninjutsu that has never been heard of, at least in the knowledge of Hatake Sakumo. Shenyi directly gathered Minato and Shikaju together, and the three of them appeared at Maidadai's house together, but found that the room was empty. At this moment, the sun had just appeared in the sky. If Shenyi hadn't appeared to look for it, Minato and Luju would still have not woken up from their sleep. Has Matt Dai gone out to practice? With such perseverance, he will definitely become a very powerful ninja in the future. Let's find him quickly, otherwise if the task is preempted, you won't be rewarded. The three of them nodded to each other and left in place, looking for Maidai's figure in 3 different directions. Compared with boring practice, real fighting can make people grow faster, which is why Shenyi insists on bringing Mad Dai together. After searching for a long time, Mad Dai was still not found, and the three reunited. Whether it's the roof or the practice field, I have searched, but I still haven't seen him. I don't know where this guy has gone. Suddenly, a dark green figure in the distance slowly appeared in the sight of the 3 people shaking his body. There's nowhere to find him when you've broken through the iron shoes. It really doesn't take much effort to find him. He just appeared out of nowhere. Minato is also very different. The reverse side has already searched for it, and there is indeed no trace of him. Minato, have you checked the Ninja Academy? Why does it feel like this guy came out of the Ninja Academy? The way he walks is obviously a collision of knowledge. Minato shook his head, and naturally ignored the Ninja Academy in the search process. No one would go to that kind of place early in the morning. The 3 couldn't help but lamented that Mad Dai was a wonderful creature, and at the same time became more curious about him. It's Shenye and you guys. It's such a coincidence that everyone here can meet you. Chapter 51. The corners of Shenya's mouth raised slightly, his hands clenched into fists and lightly collided with each other, and slowly walked towards Maidai. At this time, Maidai didn't know what happened, so he quickly accelerated his pace and stepped forward to meet Shenyi, but he didn't expect to be hit by Shenyi. With a bang, Minato and Luju watched Mad Dai being beaten, and subconsciously raised their hands to cover their heads. You guy went to Ninja Academy early in the morning. I don't know whether to praise you for being motivated or stupid. Mad Dai scratched his head, not understanding why he was beaten. Obviously he just met today, and he didn't provoke these guys. Seeing his innocent expression, Minato couldn't help but stepped forward to explain. Really, the opportunity to sway your youthful blood is right in front of you, but I go to the classroom alone to study stupidly. It's sad and lamentable. Coordinating with Mad Dai's body movements, Shenyi couldn't help but burst out laughing. Of course it wasn't a mockery. Okay, since that's the case, let's set off as soon as possible, and we can reach our destination before it gets dark. Everyone hold on to me. I have already left traces of Flying Thunder God outside the village, and I can teleport a long distance between them. Kamiya gave Minato a thumbs up. With such foresight, it is not uncommon for him to become the 4th Hokage in the future. What's more, regardless of status, Minato Namikaze is very suitable. The art of Flying Thunder God. Immediately cast the Flying Thunder God technique and left the village, once again showing that his body was already in the forest outside the village. However, this place is still a little strange to Yizan, and this is the first time he came to the woods here after he traveled to this world. You are more familiar with the terrain of the ninja world than I am, so I'll let you lead the way. Minato nodded, took out a map from the bag behind his back and laid it on the ground to observe carefully, confirming his current location. Then mark the place you want to reach this time on the map and start to follow one direction. After a day, the 4 of them finally came to a completely unfamiliar place, which Shenye had never seen in the original book. The huge stone gate is written with the words, Zhaoshan Village, crooked, and it looks like it has gone through a lot of wind and frost. Walking into the small village, the crowds coming and going added some lively atmosphere, and the mood of Shenye and the others couldn't help but improve. After all, he had been on the road all day, and had never met anyone else. Even Shenyi and the others didn't communicate too much, and they were all conserving their energy to keep on their way. He was not in a hurry to find the person who initiated the entrustment, but wandered around the village to find a place that could solve the problem of food and clothing. We are looking for a place with few people. After all, it is not our home stadium, so it is better to keep a low profile. Lu Ju nodded his head and was very pleased with our colleague Minato's thoughts. Who knows if Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is in this unremarkable small village, and there are some unreasonable and arrogant guys. A place with more people is better. We now have enough self-protection capabilities. It is the most important thing to investigate the situation here at this time. Shenyi had already spotted a place, exerted her full leadership ability, raised her feet and walked over there. Minato had no choice but to follow behind and walk towards that side. After thinking about it, he found that what Shenyi said was indeed reasonable, and it would be better to be more high profile. The outfits on several people don't look very different from here. They don't wear Konoha village's forehead protection on their foreheads, so they don't attract the attention of others. One of the signature dishes here, there are 4 of us. Although there were many people eating here in the room, the boss served the food very quickly. The 4 people who had been hungry all day started to eat and drink, and ate everything like a storm in just a few minutes. I don't know if you have heard of it, but some weird things have happened in the small mountain village recently. Yes, it is said that some inexplicable sounds can be heard at night at Xiao's house on the side of the village, but after several investigations, there is no result. Don't talk about it. If those strange guys come to your house at night, don't know if you can still laugh. Going must be going to your home. What does it have to do with me? Shenyi and Minato looked at each other. Xiao was the one who initiated the commission to Muya village. It seems that this strange matter needs several people to deal with. Let's go. It's getting late, so we can take this opportunity to take a good look. After putting down the gold coins, the 4 left here directly, and walked deep along the path of the village. Shenyi planned to visit Xiao again in the morning of the next day, and was guarding the side of the village this night to check the situation first. The sky, which was still clear and cloudless just now, suddenly darkened, and the crowd on the street walked hurriedly, as if something big was about to happen. Why does it feel like we've been tricked, or else we should just look for Xiao? Don't worry, I've learned a little about this place. It's an uneventful night. Regarding Shen Yi's words, Minato and Lu Ju completely chose to believe unconditionally. As for Matt Dai, he didn't have any ideas, as long as he could sway his youthful blood. Suddenly, bursts of raindrops fell from the sky, and Shenye and the others quickened their pace and rushed towards the village. Just at the edge of the village there is a place where you can hide from the rain, and the 4 of them rushed over without a doubt and watched the village gradually become silent. The heavy rain was approaching, and there was no human habitation in the village except Shenyi and the others. This village looks so strange. It's just an ordinary rain that can bring everyone back home. Shenyi shook his head and didn't understand what was going on. Maybe after this night all the problems could be solved easily. Suddenly, the rain accelerated the speed of falling, and the sound of thumping appeared in the ears of several people. A few little brothers are not villagers of this village. A window not far away was pushed open, and a bearded man poked his head out and asked. Since there was a raised rock above the window, no rain fell on the guy's head. Uncle, how do you know that we are not from this village? When it's raining, there are no people on the street. Only people who don't know this place will choose to take shelter from the rain outside. Serious things will happen. Uncle, can we go to your room to take shelter from the rain? It's the first time we come here and we don't understand what's going on. The bearded uncle nodded, and opened the room gently. Shenyi and the others nodded at each other and rushed into the room, shaking the remaining water stains above their heads. Why did the little brothers suddenly appear here? This is a very inconspicuous small village in the entire ninja world. Even if someone passes by, they will not stay here. To tell you the truth, he came here to carry out the task because he accepted the entrustment. The uncle doesn't look like a villager. The bearded uncle laughed loudly. The expression on his face suddenly turned cold, and he stared intently at Shen Yi. How do you know I'm not a native here? Temperament. No matter how much a person hides, he will hide his innate temperament, so I conclude that you are not from here. The bearded man patted Shen Yi on the shoulder. He couldn't see whether it was admiration or disgust, but after all, he still didn't choose to do anything to the children in front of him. On the one hand, it is because the children who can accept the entrustment will not be ordinary people, and even if they make a move, they may not end up in a good end. On the other hand, the bearded man has lived in seclusion here for many years, and he doesn't want to expose himself because of this. After all, the goal of Shen Yi and the others is not him. The rumbling sound of rain resounded outside the room, and Shen Yi looked out through the vague window, and found that this small village seemed not as simple as he imagined. Since you have discovered all of this, let me tell you my story. Shen Yi nodded and pricked up his ears to listen quietly, as did Minato and Shikaku. But at this time, an untimely sound appeared, and Matt Dai's stomach growled. Matt Dai scratched his head in embarrassment, and looked at the bearded uncle with an apologetic face. The bearded man shook his head helplessly, got up and rummaged through some food and handed it to Matt Dai. More than 10 years ago, when I was as old as you, I came to this place and have always settled here. But I'm very curious, what's so strange about this village, and why you choose to stay here? Being hunted down. Those people didn't want to go into the village, so I stayed here to escape. Shenyi touched his chin, and suddenly became more curious about this village, and at the same time wanted to know what would happen next. The sound of the rain outside the house gradually died down, and the village fell into silence after the heavy rain. The rain outside has stopped, but I still advise you to take shelter here. The night in the village is not so easy to spend. In order to complete the entrusted task, we still have to leave. Shenyi got up and cupped his fists at the bearded uncle, then turned and walked out of the room. With the pattering rain under their feet, the four of them ran towards the direction indicated by the bearded uncle, which was Grandma Shijiao's home. Leaning against the corner of the wall, the four of them hid in the dark corner, quietly waiting for strange voices to appear. Ah, night is coming. Are my fur kids already asleep? A tall figure gradually appeared in the line of sight of Shenyi and the others, swaying his body and walking towards Grandma Shijiao's house. Shenyi and Minato looked at each other, then disappeared instantly, and when they reappeared, they were already behind that guy. It seems that he didn't feel the appearance of Shenyi and Minato, and the tall guy was still swaying and walking forward. It looks like we can't wait until tomorrow morning, we need to do it now. Minato nodded, and rushed over suddenly, took out a shuriken from the ninja tool pocket on his back and held it in his hand. Without any obstruction, the shuriken directly plunged into the guy's back, but no blood seeped out. Shenyi, something is wrong with this guy. I've already discovered that it's just a puppet. Kill him first and then go to Grandma Shijiao's house to find out about the situation. Minato nodded, jumped directly from the guy's back to in front of him, and looked at the puppet. This guy is really ugly. Don't think so much, kill him directly. Minato nodded, swung the shuriken again, and plunged directly into the guy's head. A rumbling sound appeared in that guy's body, and the huge body disintegrated instantly and scattered on the wet ground, only a piece of charm floating in the air. There is a light blue light rippling on the charm, which is exactly the same color as chakra. Do you want to keep this thing? Let it go. There must be someone behind it to control its actions, so as not to startle the snake. The four people watched the talisman slowly flutter away from the small mountain village, followed the path along the street, and knocked on the door of Grandma Shijiao's house without any hesitation. Boom boom boom, boom boom boom. Grandma Shijiao in the room opened her hazy eyes, stood up and opened the door of the room. After seeing clearly the four strange faces, she became much more energetic. Why are you four little guys still wandering outside the village so late? Come in and hide. Shenyi and the others looked at each other, walked directly into the room, and looked around at the decorations inside the room. It seems that Grandma Shijiao lives here alone, and there is no novelty in the simple and plain room. Grandma Shijiao, we are ninjas from Konoha village, we came here overnight after receiving your commission. It turned out to be you guys. After such a long journey, you must be very tired. Nothing unexpected happened tonight, so you can take a good rest. Shenyi nodded, and did not continue to decline. After all, she might spend the next few days here with the old lady. Shijiao stood up slowly, only then did Shenyi realize that her back was slightly bent, and the traces of age were vividly reflected on her body. After making the bed, Shenyi lay down directly on it with his eyes closed, and after a while, he let out a cry. Let's go to sleep separately. We don't know what's going on waiting for us tomorrow, so let's recharge our spirits. I haven't finished my task today, so leave me alone. Mad Dai twisted his arms and waist and walked out of the room directly, looking for a deserted street corner to start the daily special training for the devil. 1, 2, 3, 4, 171. The night time passed quickly. Shenyi opened his eyes and the sky was already very bright. Looking at the position of the sun seemed to be noon. None of the other three people were in the room. Shenyi rubbed his sleepy eyes and walked out of the room. It was found that Minato and Luju were helping Grandma Shijiao to tidy up the weeds in the yard, but Mad Dai was nowhere to be seen. Shenyi, you are awake. Why didn't you call me and let me fall asleep alone in the room? We can do this little thing well, what else do you want to do? Shenyi shook his head helplessly, and actively joined the ranks of Minato and Luju, quietly helping Grandma Shijiao clean up the weeds. After a while, Matt walked into the yard with a bucket full of water in his hands, and walked straight towards the huge water tank. A heavy rain last night has polluted the water tank, so I helped Grandma Xiao replace it with fresh and clean water, just to take the opportunity to practice. Observing the busy figures in the yard and Grandma Xiao, who was leaning on the rocking chair quietly enjoying the sunshine, Shenyi was in a trance for a moment. Isn't such a wonderful life what I longed for before time travel? I didn't expect the time limit at this moment. However, such a beautiful moment will not exist for a long time. After all, the ninja world is still a world of fighting and killing, and fighting and confrontation can be seen everywhere. After a while, Grandma Xiao got up on crutches and walked into the house. In just a few minutes, a burst of fragrance floated through the window into the yard, and Shenyi couldn't help sniffing it fiercely. The children are ready for dinner. In the afternoon, I will take you to play around in the village. Roger that. Shenyi put down the tools in his hand and rushed into the room first, followed by Minato and Luju. Poor Mitadai was still on the way back carrying water. Just as she was about to start eating, Grandma Xiao's cane hit her hand directly and made a slap. Shenyi looked aggrieved at Grandma Xiao, who had no expression on her face, but her expression was full of indisputability. There is still a kid who hasn't come back. You have to wait for him to join you before you can do it. Shenyi shrugged his shoulders. He was indeed attracted by this delicacy, and put Mad Dai behind his mind, so he could only lean on the table with his hands on his chin and wait quietly. Why hasn't Mitadai come back? I'll miss these fragrances later, and now it's slowly fading. Yeah, I can't wait to try Grandma's cooking. Looking at how anxious you little guys are, silently counting to 3 in your heart, the little guys will appear. Shenyi slowly closed his eyes, and began to silently count 1, 2, 3 in his heart, and as expected, Mad Dai's voice came from the yard. What is so delicious? The originally steady pace quickened a lot in an instant, and he quickly poured the water in the bucket into the outline, and rushed into the room with all his strength under his feet. After a few breaths, Mad Dai sat in front of Shenyi, and was about to pick up the chopsticks to deliver the delicious food on the table to his own mouth, but found other people looking at him with strange eyes. What happened? Why are you looking at me like this? Ignore what happened, let's start. Grandma Xiao slowly removed the crutch from Shenyi's hand, and the few people could finally taste the delicious food on the table. It didn't waste too much time, even in Grandma Xiao's feeling, she just blinked a few times, and the table was empty. It's really satisfying. You can't eat such delicious food in Muya village. Minato patted his slightly raised stomach, leaned back on the chair with a loose face, slowly closed his eyes and enjoyed it. The same is true for Luju and Mad Dai, only Shenyi stared at the front with clear eyes, as if waiting for something without saying a word. After a while, there were bursts of snoring sounds in the room, and the corners of Shenyi's mouth slightly raised to look at Grandma Xiao. Now it's time to talk about what's going on. Several of them have fallen under your sweat medicine. Little guy, why don't you have anything to do? I've been on guard against you all this time. I don't trust you at all, even if you entrust us to come here to carry out the mission. Grandma Xiao shook her head helplessly, but at this moment Shenyi saw through her plan that she had worked so hard on, so she would inevitably feel a little bit reconciled. In fact, before this, Grandma Xiao had already seen the guy who manipulated that huge monster, and she was terrified at that time. But the puppet master offered a very tempting condition, that is, to let her send several children in the village to the puppet master. As a relief, from now on the puppet master will not disturb everything in Zhaoshan village. All the children in this village are regarded as their own grandchildren by Grandma Xiao, so they are naturally very reluctant to give up. He simply sent the entrustment to Muya village, intending to rely on orthodox ninja power to defeat him and return the small mountain village to a stable and peaceful scene. The appearance of the little ones in Shenyi broke all of Xiao's grandma's plans, and decided to use these children in exchange for the tranquility of the small mountain village. Although grandma is very heartbroken, I have nothing to do for the sake of the village. I have to wrong you guys. It's not just as simple as being wronged, maybe what was lost was life. Xiao shrugged. The situation has developed to such an extent that there is no room for relaxation, so he can only bite the bullet and continue. But how can an old man who is already aged be Shenyi's opponent? Shenyi stood up slowly, staring at Xiao covetously. I don't blame you for this matter. You are also thinking of the village. Give me the antidote. The puppet master will eliminate him for you. It's absolutely impossible with the abilities of you children, let alone you are not even a ninja now. Shen Yi showed a sarcastic smile. Although he did not graduate from the ninja academy, the old man in front of him didn't understand the strength of himself and his teammates at all. Even if the person standing in front of him is a very powerful guy, it will be completely defeated with the cooperation of everyone. After all, he already had combat experience before, and although there were many people watching him at that time, he would strike at any time if the situation was not good. Leave it to us, I know you are a very kind old lady. Xiao sighed deeply. He had no choice but to choose the fair boy in front of him. He would never use his own old bones to kidnap Shen Yi. Even if he did it, he would not be able to successfully capture Shen Yi in his hands, and maybe this old bone would suffer a little damage. Going back to the back of the room, Grandmaster Xiao handed the antidote to Shen Yi, then leaned on the bench and slowly closed her eyes, ready to hand everything over to Shen Yi. Returning to the table in 2 or 3 steps, Shen Yi put the antidote into the water to dissolve it, and poured it for the 3 of them one by one. Cough, cough, cough. The 3 of them opened their eyes one after another, only feeling that their throats were very uncomfortable. What happened? Why did you suddenly fall asleep? Nothing happened. You were too tired and fell asleep accidentally. Grandmaster Xiao is going to take us around the village. Shen Yi didn't tell the truth of the matter, worried that the 3 guys would have some strange thoughts after they found out, and they were full of opinions towards Grandmaster Xiao from the bottom of their hearts. Stretching his waist, Matt got up and walked outside. Today's practice task has not been completed yet, you should go for a stroll. Shen Yi shook his head helplessly, turned around and walked into the room to call Grandmaster Xiao to set off together, but found that she was already leaning on the bench and fell asleep. Makoto pulled the corner of Lishenya's clothes, and gestured to the outside of the window. Let's take a walk alone to find out the situation, and don't disturb Grandmaster Xiao's rest. The 3 of them walked out of Grandmaster Xiao's yard and walked towards the center of the village, just passing by the door of the bearded uncle's house. At this time, the bearded uncle was shaking his body gently in front of the door, enjoying the sunshine with his slightly closed eyes, and he seemed to be enjoying himself very much. Shen Yi didn't say hello to this guy, he knew that he couldn't get the information he wanted from the mouth of the bearded uncle. In order to flee and choose to settle down here, except for the natives in this village, they will have a certain degree of defensiveness towards anyone. The small mountain village looks peaceful during the day, and it is completely impossible to see such strange guys appearing at night. It's so strange that there were no strange things or strange sounds in the rainy night like yesterday. Yeah, the rainy night is obviously the time when the monster is active, but the unhurried pedestrians on the street were all talking, curious about the quietness of the night. After a short journey, Shen Yi has learned many things. Many people in the village had seen the puppet killed by Makoto last night, but no one had been attacked by him. Wandering around the village, Shen Yi decided to go back to Grandmaster Zhao's house, quietly waiting for Heiyi to appear, and follow the spell to find the guy who manipulated him. Time passed little by little, the sky slowly darkened, and the clear sky was once again covered with dark clouds. Grandmaster Zhao, does it rain here every night? There are always dark clouds at this time. I don't know why only these 2 days are very frequent. It hasn't rained for several months before that. Shen Yi rubbed his chin. It is not because of the appearance of his group that the raindrops are frequent, this small mountain village still has some magic. Accompanied by the rumbling thunder, raindrops fell. It's time to go. Matt Dai stays to protect Grandmaster Zhao. Matt Dai nodded, took a few steps closer to Grandmaster Zhao, and started some physical training on the spot with nothing to do. As soon as they walked out of the yard, Shenye and the others saw the familiar guy, still with a huge body shaking, slowly leaning towards this side. However, Shenyi was clearly in that guy's sight, but he didn't arouse any reaction from him, and he was still moving forward on his own. This guy seems to be just a controlled brainless machine. He has no thinking and vision at all. Get rid of him first. Minato and Shikaku nodded, and rushed over with the shuriken in their hands. Having already had the experience of fighting once, Minato landed the shuriken directly on the chest of the huge body without any hesitation. Lu Ju turned over and jumped and landed on his back, also stabbing the shuriken fiercely in it. As the sound of the rain gradually died down, the huge body scattered on the ground, leaving a light blue charm floating in the air. Follow him and you will be able to find out who is behind the controller, and you will be able to complete the entrusted task logically. The three of them followed the talisman quietly and walked out of the village. Even though the rain was still dripping, the talisman still emitted a faint light. We'll be leaving the village soon. We'll keep a little distance from the talisman, otherwise it's very easy for this guy to spot us. Unanimously, they slowed down a bit, and the charms were only floating around the edge of their sight. Slowly, Shenyi noticed something was wrong. He had left the village so far away, but he still had no intention of stopping. The rain in the sky had stopped, and the night was extremely quiet at this time, and there was a strange atmosphere watching the floating spells. Where is this guy hiding? It has not stopped at this time. I think it will be soon. I already feel the presence of that guy in the cave ahead. Shenyi released the chakra perception to the maximum range early in the morning, and has been paying attention to the surrounding situation, and finally found something wrong in the cave ahead. Minato and Luju cheered up instantly, and the pace of their feet quickened a little. After a while, the three of them had surpassed the spell and leaned against the edge of the cave, waiting quietly. The moment the talisman floated into the cave, Shenyi and the others would rush in and try to subdue that guy directly, saving unnecessary trouble. He came back so quickly. When did someone capable of destroying Da Zhuang show up in Zhaoshan village? It seems that we should talk to that old guy. Along with the spell, Shenyi rushed into the cave first, but was so shocked by the scene before him that he couldn't speak. I thought this was a dark and humid environment, but I didn't expect there to be a hole in it, and there was a feeling of enlightenment in front of my eyes. Shuamin and Luju also had surprise on their faces when they walked in. The walls of the cave were fully decorated, and there was no hint of a cave at all. Minato, the environment here is better than your home. Yeah, I have never seen such a luxurious decoration in Muya village, and some are reluctant to destroy it. To lure that guy out and fight again, I believe he feels the same way, more reluctant than us. The three reached a consensus in an instant, and continued to walk deep into the cave. How dare you find this cave? The person who took your life, we have accepted the entrustment to protect Grandmaster Zhao, so you should be obedient and catch him without a fight. The old guy still doesn't believe me, but you guys should stay with me. Suddenly there was a huge suction force in the cave, and the bodies of Shenye and the three of them floated into the cave uncontrollably, like light blue charms. Shenyi nodded towards Minato, and immediately put on a fighting stance, ready to meet what happened next. Approaching the depths of the cave, Shenye finally saw the guy who had been threatening Grandmaster Zhao. Medium blue long hair, fair face, looks like Jirai is about the same grade. It is completely impossible to tell that the disgusting monster was made by him. There are no children in the village to accompany me, so you stay and play with me. The puppet master had a smile on his face, but his words were full of indisputability, as if the next fate of Shenye and the others had been determined. Shenyi shook his head helplessly. How to make this guy understand that he was daydreaming? Go. Following Kamiya's order, Minato and Shikaku threw out the shurikens in their hands at the same time, and flew straight towards the puppet master's face. The latter frowned. He didn't expect the attack to appear so fast, and his body had no time to react. Suddenly, a figure rushed over from the side, blocked the shuriken with his body, and fell heavily to the ground. Afei, don't scare me, Afei. The puppet master hugged the fallen puppet in his arms with a sad face, and fixed his eyes on the puppet. Shenyi couldn't help looking at the corner of his mouth. This guy who didn't look very old was so strange. He was shocked by the disappearance of a puppet. Obviously in the next second he can resume the action of the puppet, but he has to make a fuss. Sure enough, in the next second, the puppeteer's voice stopped abruptly, and he put on a fake smile again and looked at Shenyi. You broke my toy, so you stay and play with me. You think beautiful. Shenyi gave a cold snort and suddenly took a few steps forward, concentrating on his fist and blasting it towards the air. Due to the strange force, a circular wave formed in the air and rushed towards the puppet master. The puppet master straightened his body in an instant, stepped hard on the ground with his feet, and at the same time beckoned and summoned a puppet in front of him. With a bang, the puppet was attacked by the air wave, scattered into pieces and fell to the ground, leaving a small charm floating in the air. Shenyi couldn't help thinking about how many spells the guy in front of him had. The puppet was just a carrier, and the real trouble was these spells. Makoto on the other side also discovered this truth, and threw the shuriken with the imprint towards the puppeteer. After being defeated by 2 puppets in a row, he chose to avoid their sharp edge and sideways body to avoid the shuriken attack. With a clang, the shuriken hit the wall behind the puppeteer and was instantly bounced off. Such a result was unexpected by Makoto. There was a wall that the shuriken could not penetrate, and this was just an inconspicuous small cave. This place must have been processed by him layer by layer. It may not be possible to leave a trace by relying on ordinary strength, but this is enough. The corner of Kamiya's mouth raised slightly. The purpose of Makoto throwing the shuriken was to leave a mark that could be teleported. Then it's up to you two. Makoto and Shikaku nodded, and they both ran towards the puppet master at the same time. Shadow binding technique. The long and narrow shadow meanders along Lu Ju's feet towards the puppeteer. The puppet master didn't understand Lu Ju's ninjutsu at all, and he didn't care about the shadow approaching him at all, and even the corners of his eyes were full of sarcasm. You want to control me with these shadows, you are really whimsical. The puppeteer stepped on the shadow directly, not caring about any unnecessary trouble this shadow would bring you. Get ready for our trial, now you have no way to escape. Lu Ju's shadow climbed up along the puppet master's body, and in a short while completely entangled the puppet master, unable to move a little. Makoto took the opportunity to rush to the side of the puppet master, and swung his fist fiercely towards his face. Great! The puppet master suddenly shouted, and the fragmented puppets reunited and flew over to tightly surround the puppet master. Shenyi could feel the huge amount of chakra fluctuations being transmitted back and forth between the puppet and the controller, and couldn't help frowning. Be careful, I don't know what kind of tricks this guy will play. Escape. The ethereal voice of the puppet master was transmitted around, and Dazhuang and the puppet master had switched positions. The one who was restrained by Lu Ju was the huge puppet Dazhuang, and the puppet master had already broken free from the restraints as if he was a normal person. There is no ninjutsu that can trap me in the entire ninja world. You guys should stop struggling fearlessly, and stay obediently and play with me. Shenyi carefully considered the puppet master's words, and he had been repeating the words, play with him, all along. And those puppets don't have any ability to attack people, they seem to be made to accompany him, and Dazhuang hasn't hurt anyone for so long in the small mountain village. The technique of multiplying part of the strange power. Shenyi enlarged his right fist, transmitted the strange power to the fist continuously, and blasted towards the puppet master. A blue spell flew in front of the puppeteer in an instant, and Xiaobai reappeared to block Shenya's punch, which was barely missed. This guy seems to be a little different from the guy we met before. The purpose is not to kill the enemy in front of us. I have the same feeling. It seems that what he needs more is companionship. A plan arose in Shenyi's mind, but he denied it in an instant. The various performances of the puppet master showed that what he needed was a playmate like a child. Grandma Xiao is already old, and she can't stand the puppet master's torture at all. Otherwise, he wouldn't have threatened Grandma Xiao to steal the children from the village and give them to him, but it was just to play together. I have a proposal that will save us from the next fight. I know what you're thinking, but the small mountain village doesn't seem to be able to accept outsiders. I just don't know how the bearded uncle entered the village at that time. Shenyi stroked his chin and thought carefully. Sending the puppet master to the small mountain village is not a reliable way. After all, the villagers have already cast a shadow on this guy. Maybe he wouldn't have survived the first night at all if they knew the weirdness of the night was coming from this guy. Seeing Shenyi and the others stop moving, the puppet master also calmed down and looked at the 3 people in front of him quietly, his eyes filled with curiosity. It looks like a child who has just come into contact with the world. What's your name? I'm one of them. Do you really want to find a partner to play with you? One of them nodded again and again. He had lived in this cave for an unknown amount of time, and he was always accompanied by 2 puppets. But these 2 puppets will not actively hurt people, and they will not even make aggressive actions against people under the order of one of them. Until recently, one of them discovered a nearby small mountain village, where there were many children who were almost the same as him, and wanted them to come here to play with him. But when everyone saw him, they would yell and run away in fear. Only Grandma Xiao would comfort him. The idea of using the puppets to create panic and forcing Nanny Shijiao to hand over some children appeared in Yi Yi's mind little by little. But I didn't expect that not only was it unsuccessful, but it even attracted the dislike of Grandma Shijiao, and I haven't seen her since. Just listen to me obediently, and I will let you have many companions. I'll listen to you. Minato cast a look at Lu Ju, and the two retreated to the outside of the cave little by little following Shen Yi's movements, and one of them walked behind the three. After leaving the cave, one of them subconsciously raised his hand to cover his face, as if he hadn't touched the outside world for a long time. Shen Yi couldn't help but wonder what he lived on for such a long time, and what he relied on to get through every day. After seeing the two talismans fluttering behind him, Shen Yi understood everything in an instant. Perhaps this was the only warmth his parents left him. You stay here with one of them. I'll go and bring Maidai back. We're going back to the village. Following the route, he returned to Grandma Shijiao's house in a short while. Grandma Shijiao, the crisis in the village has been completely resolved. From today onwards, there will be no more strange things happening at night. Let's go back first. Grandma Shijiao stood up quickly, rummaged through the cabinet in the corner, found an old scroll, and handed it to Shen Yi. I got this thing by chance, but no one in our small village can understand the above things, so I will give it to you as a commission reward. Shen Yi was not polite to Grandma Shijiao. She put the scroll in her pocket, turned around and gave Mad Dai a look. After saying goodbye to Grandma Shijiao, the two went to look for Minato and Lu Ju. Did you get rid of that guy so quickly? I haven't waited for my hands yet. Strictly speaking, it has not been resolved. There is still a problem that bothers us. You will understand when you meet Minato and Shikaku. Mad Dai scratched his head. Shen Yi's words made him very confused, but these brain-stirring things were not his turn to think about. Both Minato and Lu Ju are very flexible people, so as long as you follow these three people, you will be right. Seeing another member added to the team of 4, Mad Dai was stunned for a long time before realizing that this guy was inextricably linked to the puppet he saw that night. Back to the village. 1. You must keep up with our footsteps, otherwise you will fall out of the team. Understood. Minato is responsible for leading the way ahead, and Lu Ju and Mad Dai are on either side of one of them, preventing him from finding where he should go after falling behind. After all, in the eyes of these few people, leaving that cave, one of them was a child who had just entered the world, and Shen Yi was very worried about him. It was another day of rushing, and one of them finally appeared in front of Muya village under the leadership of Shen Yi and the others. Looking at the huge village entrance, one of them was in a daze for a while. It was the first time he had seen such a big village and so many people. And at this time, in his perception, everyone in sight has not weak strength, and his little caution can't be used here at all. Shancheng Qingye still appeared in front of Shenye as before, and his eyes kept falling on one of them, sizing him up and down. It's really rare to be able to go out to perform tasks in the Ninja Academy. Brother Shancheng, why don't you look at the gate carefully and always stare at me? Haha, I will go forward and give condolences to everyone who enters or leaves the village. Shancheng Qingye scratched his head in embarrassment, turned around and returned to his position with a ha-ha, not stopping Shenye and the others from entering the village. But at the same time, he has sent the situation back to Hokage's office. After all, a brand new face appeared, looking very shy. It was the first time I saw so many people coming and going on the street. One of them was leaning tightly on Mizuman's leg, looking around in a panic. Without staying on the road for a long time, Shenyi directly led a group of people and pushed open the door of Hokage's office. At this time, Sandai was sitting upright with his hands leaning on the table. Is there any gain from going out to perform the mission this time? Grandpa of the 3rd generation, so you know that we carried out the mission secretly outside. You thought you had deceived everyone. Sandai shook his head helplessly. If he hadn't agreed, how could the mission manual have finally appeared in Shenya's hands? He really thought it was Sakumo Hatake who picked up the treasure. Looking at your high-spirited looks, the task has been completed well. The crisis in that village has been resolved, and there are still some unexpected gains, but I don't know how you will deal with the 3rd generation grandpa. What you are talking about is the kid beside you. Shen Yi nodded, and told the story of what happened in the small mountain village in detail, without any concealment. In fact, Zhaoshan village is a small village in the land of fire, and the 3 Hokages know something about it, and they will not hide any lies from the 3 generations. I want the village to take in one of them. He is a very poor child, and he is kind in his heart. The 3rd generation touched his chin, his expression suddenly became very serious. There are already Yu and Meishang in the village, and that guy in Danzo has become suspicious. If there is another guy like that, Danzo may explode. Shen Yi saw the embarrassment of the 3rd generation, and it was impossible for everyone in the village to accept one of them. If other people see his puppet, some strange thoughts will appear in his heart, and he will even look at one of them with strange eyes. I know what to do. Since the village can't accept one, I have no choice but to find another way. Shen Yi shrugged, and pretended to turn around to leave, but just as his back was facing the 3rd generation, Shen Yi revealed a conspiratorial smile. Sandai shook his head again and again, raised his hand to release chakra and closed the door tightly. There is still discussion on this matter, don't rush to leave, there is nowhere to go. Then ask for a satisfactory answer. Shen Yi turned around and shrugged, walked a few steps to a chair not far away and sat down, folded his hands on his chest and quietly waited for Sandai's reply. One of them will stay in the village from now on, but he has to be put in the Anbu, otherwise it will definitely cause dissatisfaction in the village. Shen Yi nodded, although he really wanted to say that this matter was done perfectly, but after all, his ability at this time is still limited. 1. I have to listen to this old man in the future, maybe we won't see each other for some time in the future. One of them nodded obediently. He had already regarded Shen Yi as his closest person in his heart, and put all the words about him deeply into his heart. After leaving Hokage's office, Shen Yi made it easy for several people to go back to his home. Hatake Sakumo knew early on that this quest reward was a very good thing, but at that time he didn't know that it would be a scroll. For a ninja, owning a ninjutsu scroll is considered a successful practice of this ninjutsu, except for some extremely rare ninjutsu that are difficult to practice. Shrunk in his room, Shen Yi slowly spread the scroll on his bed, and silently read the words written on it word by word. The chakra in the body slowly turned with the movement of Shen Yi's mouth, unconsciously forming a light blue chakra coat on the surface of his body. Ding! Congratulations to the host for getting the chance to upgrade the system. The voice that suddenly appeared in his mind broke Shen Yi's concentrated movements, and he froze for a while without thinking clearly about what was going on. System, what happened just now? Repeat it for me again. Ding! Congratulations to the host for getting the chance to upgrade the system. Is it just an opportunity? That's right, a small test is needed to truly complete the promotion of the system. Can't you make it clearer? I have to keep asking. What a broken system. Shen Yi curled her lips, feeling deeply worried that she would meet such an artificially retarded person, afraid that one day she would be made to cry stupidly by him. Host, compete with Mate Day in a youthful and passionate competition, and if you win, you can get the opportunity to upgrade the system. This is some kind of bullshit competition. Shen Yi patted himself on the forehead, never expecting that this guy would let him complete such a stupid game. The 4 words of youth and passion, except for Matadai, no one would say it, but it was naturally revealed in the mouth of the system. Although I really don't want to play this game, the system upgrade is still very attractive to Shen Yi. A few days passed in a blink of an eye, and Shen Yi was not in a hurry to find Matadai for a youthful and passionate competition. After all, there were still new ninjutsu to study. Having not seen Shen Yi in Ninja Academy for several consecutive days, Yuexing and Meishang were faintly worried about Shen Yi. Minato, I haven't seen Shen Yi for a few days, how is he doing now? I haven't seen him either, why don't we go and see what he's up to after school? Yu Xing and Meishang nodded repeatedly, their minds had already flown to Shen Yi's home, and they were absent-minded throughout the afternoon. Time passed, and finally survived the afternoon. Yuexing and Meishang went directly to Minato to go straight to Shen Yi's house to check the situation. Pushing open the door, several people found that Shen Yi was lying on the bed at this time and sound asleep, completely unaware of how many people were already in the room. Yuexing turned his head and looked at Minato at a loss, not knowing what to do next. Minato sighed deeply, and pushed the sleeping Kamiya. After 3 or 2 slaps, Shen Yi still didn't respond, which made Minato panic a little. Did something really happen to this guy? When did you guys come here? Tsunade's voice appeared behind several people. Master Tsunade, I haven't seen Kamiya for a few days, so I'm a little worried about coming to see him. Just fell asleep not long ago. Even if there was a big explosion outside, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to wake him up. Tsunade giggled. Minato nodded and stepped out of the room. In this case, we will not disturb his rest, as long as there is no accident. Tsunade sent the children outside the room, turned around and looked at Shenya, who was sleeping, and shook his head helplessly. Only Tsunade understood what Kamiya had experienced in the past few days, and he was not allowed to delve into the contents of the scroll, just to be able to learn ninjutsu more intensively. The night passed in a blink of an eye, and Shenyi woke up early the next morning and looked out the window. The sun just got up on the horizon, twisted his neck. Kamiya stood up, left the room and walked in the direction of Ninja Academy. I haven't seen those little guys for a few days, and I don't know if I miss me. I can just take this opportunity to see how powerful the ninjutsu that doesn't rely on system abilities is. In the past few days, Shenye has completely read the scroll that Nanny Shijiao gave him, and he has tried countless times in his mind about the operation method of chakra. But without the real release of ninjutsu, Shenye is not sure that he can succeed 100%. If you accidentally fail, there is a system as the last guarantee. You can easily steal the ninjutsu on the scroll. At this time, there was only one busy figure running back and forth in the Ninja Academy. Relying on hard work to make up for the innate lack of ninjutsu, using sweat to lay the foundation for becoming the strongest ninja in the world, that is Mate Dai. Mate Dai, you are still so hardworking. You came here early in the morning to practice hard. As the saying goes, the stupid bird flies first, so you must make good use of every minute and every second to practice, otherwise you will be left behind. Shenyi shook his head. No one dared to say that he had a talent beyond Mate Dai in terms of physical skills. Before everyone shows up, let me test your current strength. Then you must let me go. Although Mate Dai said very cowardly words, his body movements had already assumed a fighting posture, and he was ready to fight at any time. Shenyi shook his head lightly. This is not a place for fighting at all. Since he wants to try his brand new ninjutsu, he must go to the practice field. If you can catch up with me, you've already won half the battle. Shenyi turned around and wanted to run in the direction of the practice field, but Mate Dai stood there in a daze and suddenly realized. As a result, powerful chakra erupted from his body, prompting Mate Dai to chase after Shenyi. The distance between the two gradually narrowed, and Shenyi frowned and found that Mate Dai was really extraordinary, and it seemed that he needed to be serious. Strange power. Condensing the chakra circulating in his body on his feet, Shenyi's speed instantly increased by a level. Like a gust of wind, all the weeds wherever it went were dumped in the direction of Shenyi's running. In just a few minutes, Shenyi accurately landed in the middle of the practice field. At this time, Mate Dai was still some distance away from the practice field. With his arms wrapped around his chest, Shenyi quietly waited for Mate Dai to appear. Shenyi, I can't see you practicing at all. But why is your strength so strong that you can easily surpass me? The strength of a person does not lie in the length of practice, but in the precise and unmistakable control of chakra. Mate Dai nodded again and again, learning every word of Shenyi humbly. At this moment, he knew that Shenyi was not only fighting with himself, but more importantly, he could learn the skills of cultivation from Shenyi. Just as Mate Dai was thinking about how to operate the chakra, Shenyi suddenly swung his fist and bombarded the front of Mate Dai. Mate Dai, who had no time to react, was directly knocked down by Shenyi's attack, and his body fell backwards and lay on the ground. This is the first lesson for you today. As a ninja, don't let your guard down at any time. Mate Dai took a deep breath, and the carp stood up straight, and stepped back a few steps to keep some distance from Shenyi. Waves of majesty appeared around, blowing Shenyi's clothes and floating. Mate Dai carefully felt the changes in the surrounding air and slowly closed his eyes. Careful, Shenyi rushed to Mate Dai in the blink of an eye, kicked his own kick when he was still in the air, and landed directly on Mate Dai's shoulder. Mate Dai moved his ears slightly, and could hear the flow in the air. Gently turning his body sideways, Shenyi's feet rubbed against Mate Dai's body and fell to the ground. The huge force directly left a deep mark on the ground. Taking advantage of this empty opportunity, Mate Dai turned over and raised his fist to punch Shenyi's stomach. Just right above him, if there is no obstruction, the fist will hit the stomach accurately in the next second. For a ninja who specializes in physical arts, his strength cannot be ignored. If he is hit, he will lose most of his combat power in an instant. The same is true for Shen Yi. Wind escape, the art of frivolity. Shen Yi quickly formed seals with both hands, and the circulation speed of chakra in the body rose to the peak that Shen Yi could persist. The fist was only 1/10 of a centimeter away from Shen Yi's stomach, and everything that Shen Yi could see suddenly became extremely slow. Using an extremely weird angle, Shen Yi dodged Maidadai's fist. Losing the target, the fist finally landed on the air, and bursts of sonic booms resounded throughout the practice field. Maidadai is really merciless, this punch is trying to kill me. Shen Yi wiped the sweat from his forehead. Fortunately, the practice of the past few days was not in vain, and he finally used the ninjutsu on the scroll. I lost Shen Yi. Shen Yi, who wanted to continue fighting, was stunned, and looked at Mad Dai with some differences. The battle had just begun, and Shen Yi didn't understand that he directly declared his defeat just because the fist attack was deflected by his own ninjutsu. Sensing Shen Yi's bewilderment, Mad Dai shook his head helplessly. This blow has already released all my chakra, and I didn't hold back a bit from you, so there is no way to continue fighting. It turned out to be like this, so I won this youthful and passionate competition. Youth, hot blood. A series of questions reappeared in Maidadai's mind repeatedly, as if possessed by a demon. The surrounding air trembled slightly, and Shen Yi realized that something was wrong and quickly released the chakra perception. During that time, the lost chakra in Maidadai's body boiled like magma, and the just lost chakra surged crazily. Shen Yi swallowed his saliva, and finally knew the best way to motivate Maidai, and his youthful blood was enough to support him to complete his entire ninja career. I'll pour a basin of cold water on you, making your whole body boil. Part of the technique of doubling. Shen Yi's hands suddenly became huge, and he directly grabbed Maidai in his hands, and threw it towards the pond not far away. With two bangs, Mad Dai sank into the pond, and Mad Dai, who was still full of arrogance just now, fell silent. The whole person stood in the pond like a drowned chicken and looked at Shen Yi quietly. He also knew that he had already lost the game, and everything was just a struggle. Shen Yi is indeed Shen Yi. Even if I explode my own small universe, I am no match. We changed into our clothes and we went back. They should already be in the classroom by this time. Mad Dai nodded, jumped out of the pond, walked a few steps to the depths of the woods where no one was around, and put on a brand new green combat uniform. At the same time, Shen Yi closed his eyes and had a conversation with the system deep in his mind. System, I have already won this youthful blood competition, so I should tell me what the upgraded system looks like next. Ding, congratulations to the host for successfully obtaining the opportunity to upgrade the system, but the functions after the upgrade still need to be explored by the host. At this time, many people had gathered in the classroom, and Shen Yi saw a few familiar figures leaning against the window at a glance. Not only Minato and Shikahisa, but also a beautiful classmate, Makoto. There are some differences in Shen Yi. How could Maken, who has always been a loner, suddenly join her team? She seems to get along very well with Yuexing and Meisheng. Shen Yi, come here quickly, there will be important news today. Big news. That's right, it is said that one of us will be chosen to graduate directly today, and he will officially become a ninja of Konoha village today. Shen Yi touched his chin, so it seems that this is indeed a big news, but it is not attractive to him at all. During the time before graduation, Shen Yi still wanted to have a good time, taking advantage of her status as a child. There are some expectations of who will end up with it. Shen Yi originally wanted to have a good night's sleep in the classroom after experimenting with a brand new ninjutsu, but he was a little curious about who in the room got such a chance at this time. As time passed bit by bit, the figure of the third Hokage quietly appeared in everyone's sight. The chattering classroom suddenly fell silent, and everyone's eyes were fixed on Sandai, with a look of anticipation in their eyes. It would be great if this lucky one is me, then I will be one step closer to Hokage. Shen Yi rolled his eyes at Minato, raised his hand and knocked on his forehead. If you want to become a ninja in the end, you have to be down to earth. If you take a shortcut, I will be the first to disagree with you becoming a ninja. Minato nodded aggrievedly, and quickly gave up the idea just now, and the expectant eyes began to change little by little into indifference. If he accidentally becomes a lucky guy, Minato has already decided in his heart to reject the third generation without hesitation and let him choose again. Lu Ju had the same idea in his heart. The influence of his family made him not value the title, as long as he could make contributions to the village. Sandai's eyes slowly passed over everyone in the classroom, and finally fell on Shenyi. No way, this old guy is staring at me again. Student Shenyi, who do you think is suitable for this position? Of course it's Maide. Matt Dai looked at Shenyi with a surprised face. In any case, he never thought that Shenyi would recommend himself to be the lucky one, get rid of Ninja Academy as soon as possible and become a real ninja. Shenyi, it's just a recommendation, and the final decision still depends on the 3 generations. The 3rd generation looked at Matt Dai meaningfully, then touched his chin and did not express his attitude and decision at the first time, but chose to fight a match. Since Shenyi has already recommended a classmate, whoever wants to get this spot, just challenge it. Shenyi snorted coldly, stood up from his seat, and walked to the front of the classroom in a few steps. The small body stood beside the 3rd Hokage Hiruzuru Sarutobi, looking straight ahead with a serious expression. Although come to challenge, as long as you can beat me, you can directly get the chance to be promoted. What an arrogant tone, I'm here to challenge you. A muscular young man stood up, and it seemed that he had been dissatisfied with Shenyi for a long time, and the current challenge was just a breaking point. Shrugging indifferently, Shenyi raised his head and looked at Sandai. My lord, what do you think of this matter? Now go to the practice field. The whole classroom boiled instantly. Not only the little guy who was about to fight Shenyi was very excited. Those guys with the mentality of watching the excitement are even more enthusiastic, as if they are the ones who are about to enter the battle. The mighty crowd attracted the attention of the surroundings, and they discussed with the people around them in a low voice whether something important happened in Muya village. In just a few minutes, the classroom was empty. It's too time-consuming to come one by one, it's better to go with those who want to challenge. Kamiya, don't think that you can be so arrogant because you have some achievements. Today, I, Ryota Kuma, will let you know what a real ninja is. Shenyi shrugged indifferently, not putting this guy in front of him in his eyes at all. One hand is enough to deal with you and me, isn't it, Ryota Kuma? Ryota Kuma twitched the corners of his mouth. He was very angry at Kamiya's provocation, and he couldn't control his chakra just about to move. Strong collapse. All of a sudden, Kuma Ryota took a firm step forward. There was enormous power under his body that was as stable as a mountain, but it was still tense and did not burst out. The 3rd generation's eyes lit up. He had never seen these little guys fight, and now he looked very pleasantly surprised. Kuma Ryota's strength is enough for him to become a ninja, and he just needs to wait quietly for the moment when the Ninja Academy graduates. Shenyi yawned, looked loosely at the tense Kuma Ryota in front of him, and slowly raised one hand to stand in midair. Strange power. Another burst of stronger power appeared, and Ryota Kuma felt a mountain pressing on him. His body began to tremble slightly, and his forehead was already soaked with sweat. Before they really collided together, Ryota Kuma was already at a disadvantage. This guy is still as arrogant as ever, and he won't hide his own strength at all. He has already put such a lot of pressure on his opponent before the sparring has even started. Although he was very sure of Shenyi, Sandai knew that he would not accept early graduation from Ninja Academy, so he did not choose to directly announce his departure. On weekdays, the 3 generations didn't have the slightest understanding of these children from the Ninja Academy, so Shenyi would choose a suitable person as a recommendation. Kuma Ryota took a deep breath, forcibly broke the oppressive feeling in his heart and rushed towards Kamiya. However, due to being too nervous, his movements were full of loopholes. Shenyi just moved his fist lightly, and pushed Kuma Ryota to the ground. I have already said that it is better for you to go up together. There is no way to beat me if you come up one by one. Shenyi's arrogance ignited in an instant, and the guys gathered around to watch the fun were a little eager to go up and teach this arrogant guy a lesson. However, after Ryota Kuma, he was not willing to step forward and be beaten severely. Everyone knows Ryota Kuma's strength. He felt the eagerness of these guys around him, but he never stepped forward to confront him. Shenyi couldn't help turning around and looking at the 3rd generation. Does this result mean that he has won, and that Maid Dai can embark on the path of tolerance from now on? He is alone, and he himself proposed to let us go together. What are you waiting for? A familiar figure suddenly appeared in the crowd, and Shenye saw that it was Minato. The guy who doesn't think it's a big deal to watch the excitement even actively stirs up the commotion around him is also a manifestation of his blind confidence in Shenyi. In Minato's heart, these guys would not be Shenyi's opponent even if they fought together, even if he and Lu Ju joined it. It is good. That's it, let's see how powerful he is. More and more people began to respond to Minato's words, thinking of slowly surrounding the middle of the venue. Minato and Lu Ju looked at each other, and the two pulled Yuexing and Shengmei back again and again, for fear of being affected by Shenya's attack. Maken stood not far away to see the situation here, rolled her eyes and gradually distanced herself from these crowds. Is it finally here? Weird force. Shenyi raised his fist and slammed it on the ground fiercely. The rumbling sound spread out along the place where Shenyi's fist fell. Suddenly, a huge collapse occurred on the ground, and all the children running towards Shenyi fell into the collapsed ground, losing the chance to continue fighting. The third generation frowned. Such exquisite control of chakra has far exceeded what this age can master. It really is a rare genius boy. But young geniuses all have their own ideas, and Sarutobi Hiruzen has no way to influence Kamiya's thoughts. I've already won. Matt Dai can be directly promoted to genin. It's okay, but the practice field has been destroyed by you, so there should be some compensation. The corners of Shenya's eyes twitched. The third Hokage of the dignified Konoha village had the nerve to ask him to pay compensation for the damaged training ground. Could it be that he was not the culprit of all this? Feeling the smirk on Sandai Hokage's face, Shenye thought for a moment that he had been cheated by this old guy. No matter who in the classroom is now qualified to become a ninja, in the end they just want to renovate the facilities of the training ground. My lord of the third generation, I have something to do, so I will leave first, and the repair work of the practice field will trouble you. Clenching his fists at Sandai, Shenye ran away without giving Sandai a chance to continue talking. The people around consciously made way for Shenye, and Shenye left the practice field without looking sideways and walked towards Yil Ramen, feeling faintly hungry. From a distance, Shenye saw the guy in the green combat uniform sitting at Yil Ramen. Shenyi rubbed his chin and suddenly remembered that he hadn't seen this guy in the classroom or training ground just now, but he came here to steal food. Matt Dai, why didn't I see you in the classroom? I finally found that the classroom is not suitable for me. Only by persistently completing the practice tasks every day can I improve my physical skills little by little, so I have been practicing outside just now. I have good news for you, you missed the time you were not in the classroom. Shenyi, are you confused? When the third generation asked you to make a choice, I will sit by your side. This time, Shenyi was even more confused. He couldn't figure out when Mate Dai left everyone to practice alone outside. Could it be that he was on his way to the practice field? Shaking his head helplessly, Shenyi decided not to think about these things. After all, Matt Dai has become a real ninja at this time. Report to the third generation office tomorrow, you are already a ninja. I knew it must be you who won. Blind self-confidence in me, so you don't even watch my game, right? You and Minato are a mess. Shenyi rubbed his fists, walked towards Matt Dai with a smirk on his face. A burst of wailing came from Matt Dai's mouth, and it was continuous. After a little venting, Shenyi was in a good mood, but felt sorry for Matt Dai's already bloated head. At this moment, Matt Dai seemed to have a feeling of self-reliance, and he looked very happy. Shenyi, you are now more and more like Master Tsunade, and you can even control the beating person so steadily. Matt Dai tremblingly raised his thumb to express his affirmation to Shenyi, and then picked up the chopsticks with the swollen hair on his head and sent the ramen to his mouth. At this moment, the surroundings suddenly became noisy. Shenyi frowned and looked towards the source of the sound. This is the silent area allowed by the village, and no one would make any noise near Yil Ramen. Several guys with Union Village forehead guards on their foreheads were leaning together and laughing. However, there are only two people around him and Matt Dai. These guys must be laughing at the big bag on Mate's head. Hey, you guys, be quiet. What are you yelling about, kid? Even if the ninjas of your village are standing here, they wouldn't dare to speak to us with such an attitude, do you understand? Shenyi pouted and didn't plan to talk to these ignorant guys. After all, this is Muya village, so it's better to put on a show when visiting ninjas from other villages. But seeing that Shenyi didn't continue to speak, these little fellows in Union Village thought that Shenyi didn't dare to contradict him, so they pushed even further. Hey, get out of the way, you two little brats. I have heard that the eel ramen here is very delicious. Today I can finally try it. The guy from Union Village pushed Shenyi, but he didn't expect that Shenyi didn't move at all, and sat on his original position like a rock. The guy in the lead knew that it was an iron plate that was not easy to push, so he turned his head and looked at Mad Dai. This guy with green bags all over his head must be very easy to provoke, otherwise he wouldn't be beaten like this. However, before he put his hand on Maidadai's shoulder, Maidadai's body flashed a few times and appeared behind these guys. Wood industry whirlwind. With a slight effort under his feet, he jumped into the air, and with a single blow, he swept his legs and knocked down all the ninjas in Union Village. I am young and passionate, and you can touch me. How miserable do you want to die in Muya Village? Just when Mad Dai was about to attack further, the figure of Aoba Yamashiro appeared in Shenya's sight and waved repeatedly. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.